Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It is May 27th, 2022, and we are here for what I think is going to be an exciting few hours of discussion, review, and analysis. Recently, Mormon Apostle, Prophet, Seer, and Revelator, David Bednar? Is it David A. Bednar? Presented to the National Press Club in Washington, D.C.
You can guess what the A stands for.
And there's RFM joining in. Hey, RFM. And as we'll be discussing, this is the first time a Mormon church representative has addressed the National Press Club in 22 years. And we're going to be talking about why that is. But it was basically an hour-ish long presentation, and we're here to kind of break it down. This is not just going to be looking for the faux pas or the gotchas, although we are going to be talking a little bit about some of those. It's a little bit broader. We want to do kind of a thoughtful, fair-minded analysis of kind of the church's positioning. So as I reviewed this talk from Elder Bednar, what I realized is that they talk about the threefold mission of the church, which is perfecting the saints, redeeming the dead, proclaiming the gospel. So they talk about the missionary program, they talk about church education system, and they try to address controversial topics like blacks in the priesthood, women in the church, LGBTQ issues, etc. And it's an important moment to sort of analyze in 2022 how the Mormon Church is spinning through PR what it's about and its state of affairs and how it views the future of the church. So that's what we're going to be trying to do today. We're really excited to have with us in studio our dear colleague and co-host Gerardo Sumano to help us with this analysis. Hey, Gerardo.
Hey, everyone.
You did a lot of the early analysis on this.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gerardo.
Yeah.
We also have Jen in studio. Hey, Jen.
Hi, everybody.
Camp. Thanks for joining us, Jen. It's always great to have you.
Of course.
And we're thrilled that Radio Free Mormon is willing to join us from an undisclosed bunker location somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. Is that right, Radio Free Mormon?
Well, I've moved to Ukraine, but yes, other than that, everything else is correct.
Perfect. All right. Radio Free Mormon, anything you want to say before we jump in?
No, I'm just delighted to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I look forward to the discussion. I think it's going to be great.
All right. Well, thanks, RFM. Well, let's go ahead and dive in. So yeah, you can go to the National Press Club's website to see, their headline, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Elder David A. Bednar to speak at luncheon Thursday, which technically was yesterday. And so what we thought we'd do is just start with an introduction, and we're just going to play different clips. We're going to play almost all of Bednar's presentation, and we're going to stop it and react to it as we go. And then we're going to also play the Q&A. And the big question for today is, will we be able to cover it all today? Or will we need to sort of do his presentation as a part one and then the Q&A as a part two? And we're just going to see how much time we have. We've also invited some of you viewers or listeners to join us to get your analysis. So at a certain point, maybe at the end of part one, we'll bring on a few of you to give your own analysis. And in the description of the YouTube and Facebook description is where you can click a link to actually join here. And like in a call-in show, make sure your video and your audio are working. Please remove yourself if your video and audio aren't clearly working. All right, so let's jump into the introduction to this important event. And then, of course, we welcome our viewers on YouTube and Facebook. We're going to be monitoring your comments, and we're going to try and incorporate them as well. We've got Gerardo and Jen here to help with that. So let's go ahead and dive in. Here we go.
For the first time in nearly 50 years, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on April 18th opened its Kensington, Maryland temple to curious non-members. Since then, more than 100,000 people have visited the newly renovated temple, and thousands more are expected before the tour ends on June 11th. On August 14th, following its rededication, the sacred space will once again close to those who are not members of the faith. For most people in the capital region, the temple, whose white and gold spires just outside and above the Capitol Beltway, is both a landmark and a mystery, a bit like the religion itself. The Church of Latter-day Saints counts 16.8 million people worldwide among its members. In the United States, the church is the fourth largest Christian denomination, with more than 6.7 million members. It has also become a force in the humanitarian world. Last year, its members engaged in nearly 4,000 humanitarian projects in 188 countries, expending $906 million and contributing 6.8 million hours of volunteer service in areas such as vaccine distribution, clean water and sanitation, and educational initiatives.
All right. So to begin with, some things, there are obviously this press moment, this PR moment is clearly to coincide with the refurbishing of the Washington, D.C. temple. That's interesting to me because my wife's parents, Margie's parents, lived in D.C. and joined the church as the result of visiting the Washington, D.C. temple open house back in the 70s. Mm-hmm. So this is what literally brought Margie's parents into the church, which brought Margie into the church, which then allowed me to meet and marry Margie. And Margie and I were married in the D.C. temple. So for many reasons, this whole thing is kind of near and dear to my heart. The church is clearly seeing this as an opportunity to be on the global stage to talk about what's going on. The first thing that just really jumped out to me about what was just said is some of these numbers: 16.8 million members worldwide, 6.7 million members in the United States, and the fourth largest Christian church in the U.S. Maybe should we begin and say any thoughts or reactions to those numbers?
Okay, yeah, I can go. So, I mean, we know that a lot of the church membership is inactive. The church doesn't know where they are. And really the people that show up to church is a very small percentage of those numbers. And actually, Elder Bednar is going to reveal a couple other numbers later on his talk that, make you kind of think, okay, is it really 17 million active members? I mean, they're not claiming they're active, right? But that's what with someone that hears that statistic outside the church would think.
Yeah. Like by best estimates, there's about 3 to 4 active Mormons worldwide. And when I say active, attending church once a month, maybe a third of those are actual temple recommend holders who are paying tithing. And in many of these large countries like Mexico and Brazil, there's a huge discrepancy between the number of members the church claims and the number of people who self-identify as Mormon within the country, right? Like in Brazil and Mexico. And the inactivity rates in Latin America, in the Philippines, and in Western Europe and in Asia, the activity rates are like 10%. Mm-hmm. So at best, the church has 3 to 4 million active members. So I guess, what do you think, panel? Is it dishonest for the church? The church knows this. Is it dishonest for the church to claim 17 million members? Jen?
I believe so.
You think that's dishonest?
Mm-hmm. It's misleading, and it's dishonest, I would say.
All right, family, we'd love to get your thoughts here. You're muted.
Probably for the best. Anyway, I was trying to do some research and see about that. No, I think this is a good example of what we're going to find throughout, is that the positives about the church are going to be extremely puffed up and overdone, and nothing negative mentioned about the church by Elder Bednar at any time. The best face will be forward. The 16.8 million is a big number. But then I was kind of surprised to hear that it's only the fourth largest denomination in the United States.
What would the other ones be? I'm looking it up right now.
Well, I think Catholicism probably.
Yeah.
Maybe Episcopalian, maybe.
Seventh-day Adventists are pretty big too.
I was trying to look that up too. That's when I was muted and I was trying to look it up, and I've got this big chart from Wikipedia that doesn't really help a lot.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm guessing Catholic Church, maybe First Baptist Church or something like Evangelical Christianity, if they count that as one big church.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, Jen says it's misleading, and RFM, you're saying they're putting their best foot forward, but not being fully honest.
Right.
I wonder if that's going to be a theme throughout.
It is.
This presentation is not being fully honest.
Right.
Is that being too hard though? Is that being unfair? Like, is it unfair to expect a church in a PR moment to do anything other than just put their best foot forward? I mean, isn't that what any of us would do? If I'm in the Open Stories Foundation and I'm talking about how, the status of the OSF, would I be talking about the good and the bad, or would I just talk about the good?
If you want to be perceived as being honest, you'll mention some negatives.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Mm.
All right. Well, the other thing that's kind of interesting is in the opening salvo, they're wanting to mention that the church is a humanitarian force. And this is going to be mentioned a lot later. What do you guys think about kind of the church being characterized as a humanitarian force? I think that's what's bizarre about that is that later Elder Bednar is going to literally say we're not primarily a humanitarian organization.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of, I didn't think about that until now. That's kind of ironic that they're leading. Oh, go ahead, Gerardo.
Yeah, well, I think we should wait to hear what Elder Bednar says and the numbers he gives us and the statistics. But I think a theme that is going to come or that came to my mind was like, yeah, this number sounds really impressive. That's amazing, all the stuff that they're doing. But then this number that Elder Oaks mentioned once in 2016 about 40 million being the average amount of money that the church spends keep coming to my mind. So then I did an analysis and we'll look at it. Yeah,
we'll cover that
graph. But
I'll keep mine then.
Yeah, so everyone stay tuned about that.
Talk about that later.
Thing, yeah.
One small quibble I had was with the introduction where they're talking about the temple and talking about it as a sacred space and that it's open to the public now and that this sacred space will then close to the public upon its rededication, which is going to be in August. And the thought that crossed my mind was, well, not exactly, because it's not a sacred space when the public can come in. It's only a sacred space when it's dedicated, and it will only become a sacred space when it's rededicated. But I think that's a way of making it sound more like the church is more inclusive and accepting of people coming into its sacred spaces, when I think technically that's not accurate.
Interesting point. Thanks, RFM.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the next. Let's go ahead and go to the next clip.
But it's not without controversy. The church wrestles with unflattering depictions of the faith in popular culture, including reality shows focused on fundamental sex that embrace polygamy or plural marriage, a practice disavowed by the church in 1890 and again in 1904. And it wrestles with its own soul, struggling in recent years with its relationship with LGBTQ members and their place within the faith.
So what I thought was interesting about this is just this desire to really separate the church from polygamy by saying that polygamy is disavowed.
Twice.
Yeah, twice.
Why did they have to do it a second time? One wonders, 14 years after the first time.
Yeah, anybody, Jen, you probably have, what do you think about the church really leading with, and this is the reporter summarizing the church, but it might be from talking points the church gave her. I don't know. Jen, what do you think about the church really leading with we disavow polygamy? Is that problematic to you in any way?
Yeah, it's problematic because they don't.
What do you mean?
They don't disavow it. It's still practiced in the eternities. It's still practiced here on earth with men having a wife that is passed away and then one that is here on earth, but they are both his eternal companions, which is polygamy still. So it's not disavowed. It's not something that we do not practice in some way still. So that's being, again, misleading.
Yeah.
And dishonest.
Gerardo?
Yeah, I agree with that. I tend to think that she was not and she didn't get a script from the church. This was more like her own thing. But I mean, she's taking it from what the church tries to always say, right? That, oh, we don't practice polygamy anymore. Like they're like those shows and on TV have nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
When in reality, that's how the church started. That's what the belief still is. And yeah,
when we're talking about public relations, what for those who aren't in the know, what we're talking about here is that our current two highest ranking Mormons, Russell M. Nelson, our prophet, and Dallin H. Oaks, the first counselor in the first presidency, they're both polygamists. Literally, they are sealed to multiple women in the eternities. So they believe right now, if they were to be willing to answer the question, to appear in public and answer the question, they believe that when they die, they'll have multiple spouses in heaven. When you combine that with the fact, if you read Doctrine and Covenants, section 132, which we've covered on Mormon Stories, we can include that in the show notes. Mormon scripture still is very polygamy affirming. It's still a core part of our doctrine. And so that's deceptive in many ways. And really, really disingenuous to leave that out. RFM, what would you add to that? Anything?
No, just that question that I had, which is they say that the church disavowed polygamy in 1890 and again in 1904. And that is a classic example of talking about, it's not just one side of the issue. We're just talking about the tip of the iceberg of the issue. And there's this huge iceberg underneath the surface that they're not mentioning. And this is the positive little tip that they're going to talk about. And this is going to be what happens throughout, that there's just this tip. And if you know enough about what's under the surface, which everybody here does, and probably most of the listeners do, you can see exactly what I'm talking about as this goes on.
Okay.
And I think something that is disavowed, or whatever word they used,
Disavowed.
Yeah, would not affect women anymore. And polygamy still affects women in the church, even if it's believed only it happens in the eternities. That is a deep hurt and a deep, just a deep gospel principle that hurts and is hard for women to understand and to agree upon, and it's still hurting women.
Yeah.
So if it's disavowed, I don't believe that it is.
And the best resource for that we'll include in the show notes is Carolyn Pearson's book, The Ghost of Eternal Polygamy. And we did an episode with Carolyn Pearson about that. But that's a really good treatment of how polygamy still affects people today. So I wish the church would get rid of that talking point and just say, yeah, we believe in polygamy. It's complicated, but it's an eternal principle that we still espouse. Wouldn't that be perfectly honest, Gerardo?
Yeah.
Is that unrealistic, Jen?
Yeah, they should say it like that.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider that Russell M. Nelson's first wife died, and then only 14 months after that, he was marrying Wendy.
Yeah. Eternally. Sealing.
Yeah, exactly.
Getting sealed to Wendy for eternity.
Right.
Not just marrying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Anything else on that, RFM?
No.
Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and go to the next clip.
Here to enlighten and update us this afternoon on the future of the church is Elder David Bednar, a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and the first church leader to speak before the club in 22 years.
Okay. So I thought it would be interesting to talk about why it's been 22 years since the church has appeared in front of the National Press Club. And generally speaking, with the internet age, the church is really uncomfortable dealing with difficult questions. And even though 2000 was a long time ago, this really was accentuated in 2008 and later when Mitt Romney started running for president. And we just want to remind our listeners about kind of a really important event that happened, which was that the BBC, the British Broadcasting, whatever the C stands for, they did an episode on Mitt Romney called "This World: The Mormon Candidate" with a man named John Sweeney. And in that episode, they did a little feature on kind of the church and the temple and the temple rituals and the Strengthening the Members Committee and apostasy within the church. And I'm just going to play a little clip from that to remind everyone why church leaders don't want to meet with the press. So, a lot of people feel like Elder Holland was caught in a lie there because he wanted to say that he literally said that Romney would not have done the blood oaths, but then Sweeney was prepared and called him on it, and then he tried to kind of pivot. But it just goes to show you how problematic it is to be a church leader and have to speak for the church. And my understanding is the head of PR for the church was fired because of that BBC series, that it caused that much problem and stress for the church. Did you guys have a reaction to that Holland quote? RFM, we'll let you go. Anything you want to say, RFM, about that Holland? Do you think that was a pretty significant moment?
Oh, I do. Well, somebody's got to swing for that. And I guess it was the head of PR.
Yeah, he did.
I really like where he goes, though. I mean, he is caught so flat-footed, and he knows it, and he is so trying to put this in present tense, and he's called on the past tense. He immediately caves. He cracks like a nut, and he says, yes, okay, we used to. But it's so funny where he comes to this personal pledge to the Lord, because, of course, nobody would ever want to publicly talk about a personal pledge they made to the Lord. That stuff's got to be kept secret with penalties and oaths.
Yeah.
And it just did you want to say something, Jen?
I was just saying it shouldn't be hard. Like, it shouldn't be hard for them to do PR interviews and things like that.
Why?
Because they shouldn't be lying. Like, if they're telling the truth, it's not hard to have PR interviews.
Why would they be embarrassed by something they believe is true?
Exactly. So, if you don't have to lie, if you don't have to cover up things, if you don't have to, then you could talk all you want. You could have interviews all you want. You could answer questions without a pre-paper that tells you what the questions are going to be.
And I think Elder Bednar actually did a pretty good job overall, looking at it from his point of view. I think he did a good job with his address, eating up the time by lots of really kind of meaningless statistics about how wonderful the church is. And he did a pretty good job with the Q&A. And I've got to think that he sat down after he was done and saying, thank God, at least I didn't cock it up as bad as Elder Holland did.
Well, one of the questions I had with Gerardo was, did he get the questions from the Q&A in advance? But let's not. We don't know. We would have to speculate. But what we did want to do is just share a couple more clips about Bednar's history with the media, only because we feel like people should know about these two instances, because I think they're kind of really important. They help illustrate again even Bednar's history with kind of public faux pas. So let's go ahead and go to two of Elder Bednar's past media faux pas. And these aren't media faux pas. Maybe I should have used different text there, but they're social media faux pas. So let's go to the first one. This is a really famous one where Elder Bednar makes the famous claim that there are no homosexuals in the Mormon church. Let's go to that one.
Next question.
Siguiente pregunta.
This is a question from Chile.
Esta es una pregunta de Chile.
Our translation has to be perfecto. Ready?
Yes.
How can homosexual members of the church
¿Cómo pueden los miembros de la iglesia homosexuales
live and remain steadfast in the gospel?
vivir y permanecer fieles en el evangelio?
First, I want to change the question.
Primero quiero cambiar la pregunta.
There are no homosexual members of the church.
No hay miembros de la iglesia homosexuales.
We are not defined by sexual attraction.
No somos definidos por atracción sexual.
We are not defined by sexual behavior.
No se nos define por nuestra conducta sexual.
We are sons and daughters of God.
Nosotros somos hijos e hijas de Dios.
And all of us have different challenges in the flesh.
I think, Gerardo, you'd be best to kind of give a super quick response to that faux pas.
Yeah, that's really like something that made me laugh right now that I've never noticed is that his wife starts looking at him as he's asking the question and he's starting to respond. And as soon as he starts saying there's no homosexual members of the church, she goes like this and stops looking at him, like feeling really uncomfortable. And yeah, it's kind of interesting, right? Because by that point, the church already had a website called Mormon and Gay. They had a website with videos of Mormons identifying as LGBT. You know, Jessica Fulmer fully identifying as lesbian and saying that she was never going to marry a man. So yeah, just this contradiction of what he was saying in Latin America. And interestingly, I was talking to a friend of mine who.
So you're saying that was kind of even at the time that was kind of deceitful.
Yeah.
For him to claim that when the church had a Mormons and gays website back at home.
Well, it really shows his real feelings. You know, I think not all, like, although most members want to believe that all the apostles agree on everything or every doctrinal point, like, this shows that they may not be agreeing on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And this is one of them,
Yeah.
because we have Elder Oaks also saying similar stuff, that people shouldn't identify as gay. And what I was just going to say is that in Latin America, unfortunately, this is the only thing that members know about LGBT people. So if you ask anyone, what does the church think about LGBT people here in Mexico or anywhere in Latin America, they're going to bring up this quote.
Mm-hmm.
This is the only one they've ever heard.
Yeah.
And the most known. It was circulated widely in social media.
Yeah. You bring up a good point, Gerardo, and I think this is an extension of the point you made, Jen. In addition to just being honest, perfectly honest, there's clearly doublespeak. There's clearly what the church teaches, what the church believes, and what they discuss privately, which the Mormon Leaks videos where the apostles are talking about the gay agenda, that's what they really think, right? Then there's what they tell the members, which is that there is no homosexuality, there are no homosexual members. That's what this video shows. Kind of like speak differently to the members than they speak behind closed doors. And then we contrast that with what Elder Bednar is going to say in this press junket, which is, we love all gay people. We want to work with them. There's this kind of 3 levels of honesty, or 3 levels of dishonesty, or 3 levels of communication that this Bednar clip kind of illustrates. Is that fair? Unfair?
Fair.
All right. Anything to add, Jen?
No.
Gerardo, RFM, anything you want to add?
Yeah, the only thing that struck me this time, which must be, I don't know, we got to be at least in double digits of times I've watched this, is that what he's saying is that people are not defined by their sexual orientation. People are not defined by their sexual behavior. People are defined by their religious beliefs.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, well, there's one other clip we wanted to add, which is also kind of disturbing, and I think we're just sharing this because we want people to understand that the private Elder Bednar is very, very different from this polished PR Washington D.C. Elder Bednar, and I think this clip that we're about to show, called "The Lord's Side of the Line," illustrates it. And we cut it for brevity's sake. We took about 3 minutes out of this clip, but basically Elder Bednar brings this little kid on, starts illustrating how Satan manipulates Mormons or kids. The kid's crying almost the whole time. And this is the final part of the clip, which to me is one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen a Mormon apostle do. And that's saying something. But here's the end of this clip.
They keep you way back over there. Do you like being this close to the line? Do you know what happens when you get this close to the line?
No.
A sin that's right here doesn't look that bad, does it? Right where my shoe is? Oh, that's not that big of a deal. Okay, take just a little step over here. One more step. Just a little more. Okay. Now you try to get back over on the other side. Can you get over there?
No.
For an old man, I'm pretty strong, huh? You're not even trying very hard. Come on. All right, now. Remember what got you over here? You came all the way from back over there to right at the edge of the line by just not doing the things that you know you should do. And once you get over here, you're not in control anymore. Okay? All right, now step back over here. So your question was, if you're not praying or reading, what's the best way to get started again, right? You just remember what it was like to be over there. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. You don't want to be there. And you're in charge. you're in control because of your agency of making sure that you don't get so close to the line that you'd make a mistake and step over. So you stay turned this way by choosing the right. And you go deeper over here to where it's safe by continuing to choose the right. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Tell me your name.
Bryson.
Bryson, thank you. What a great question.
So Jen, I think that's the first time you've seen that clip. Did you have any quick initial reaction to it? I know it was just a partial clip.
Sorry, that was disturbing to me a little bit. So, yeah, that was super disturbing to see him. I don't know. All I saw was him being restrained and him being taught about shame, like being shamed. Just, that was just very disturbing to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's the fear and the shame about
Yeah.
Satan and the line and don't
Yeah.
cross it.
And at that
the
age,
kid's
like,
crying
and at that age, like, sin to them is like, oh, I hit my brother while I was watching TV, So this little kid is like running through things in his brain that are like not sin.
Well, actually,
they're
he
just like
says that.
They're just like a little. Oh, he does.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
we
so
didn't show you the
we
full
didn't
clip.
show the
Oh.
whole clip, but Elder Bednar is taking him towards Satan's side, and he says, "If you don't read your scriptures, you go towards Satan. If you don't listen to your
Jeez.
parents, you go towards Satan." And then it's just like this. Elder Bednar is giving him examples of like little things, like you didn't pray tonight, and then he finally gets to Satan's side,
Well, that-
and then Elder Bednar is saying he's Satan and trying to hold him. I don't. It's
That makes it even more disturbing to
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
Actually, that he was saying those words to him, because any little boy's heart, like he's gonna go home thinking he's already held by Satan. In
Yeah.
that, like,
Yeah.
I don't know. That was very disturbing. To me.
Especially when
I'm
his
so mad about
question-
that.
The question of the kid was, "What can I do when it's hard to to remember to read my scriptures?"
Yeah.
Like, really, and you just totally like traumatized him. Like he,
Traumatized him,
yeah, traumatized him.
Yeah, we've traumatized Jen
Yeah.
by showing her that clip. And then there's a problem with just consent. Like, he's holding this kid from behind in a very awkward and uncomfortable embrace. Did he ask the kid, "Can I touch you?" Does he show any sensitivity towards the power imbalance and just violating the kid's general space? RFM, I know you have really fun and interesting comments that are probably dark and also.
It's like you can read my mind.
You want to share about that clip, RFM?
Well, I've seen it a number of times, so I may be a little bit more inured to it than Jen is because she's seen it for the first time. But every time they get to that point where he's grabbing him from behind, I'm not sure if I'm watching a church production or a NAMBLA promotional video.
That's the National Association of Man Boy Love. That's the.
Thanks for putting a fine point on my joke.
Yeah, it is disturbing. I mean, it's disturbing. And, I guess, I've done 1,600 hours of Mormon Stories episodes now. You could find embarrassing things that I've said. So on the one hand, I'm like, oh, are we being unfair to Elder Bednar by pulling a couple of his worst moments? And there's this idea that no one should be defined by their worst moments. And I believe that. But I think the reason why we're showing these clips is because I think this is who Bednar is. And we just want to contrast how he presents himself in the public image with kind of who he is behind the scenes. He would never do that boy exercise in the United States, let alone in front of the media. And if he did, they would be shocked and horrified. Just like he would never make that comment about no homosexuals in the church in front of that audience of journalists. So it just illustrates who he really is, so that we don't be too deceived by the PR spin. Is that fair? Have we made the point?
Fair.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and go on to the next point. Hopefully people don't feel like we're being too unfair to Elder Bednar. So now we get to the substance of Elder Bednar's main talk. And here we go.
The quorum is the second highest presiding body in the governance of the church under the first presidency, a governing unit of 3 men, the president and 2 counselors. Members come from a variety of fields, including law, business, medicine, academia, and the judiciary. When called to serve, they put aside their professions to assume their ecclesiastical administrative responsibilities, overseeing the progress and development of the global church. Before his calling, Elder Bednar had a distinguished career in academics. After serving as a missionary in Germany for 2 years, Elder Bednar attended Brigham Young University, where he received a bachelor's and master's degree, and then went on to earn his doctoral degree in organizational behavior from Purdue University. He began his career as a professor of business management, first at Texas Tech University and then at University of Arkansas. He then was appointed as president of Brigham Young University, Idaho, where he served from 1997 to 2004. Elder Bednar, welcome to the National Press Club. The floor is yours. The podium is yours.
So one really quick thing that we just want to highlight people's attention to, that they'll want to kind of pay attention to later, is they just spent a significant amount of time reading his CV, his resume, his academic credentials, and it's as if they really want to play up the fact that he's a scholar, that he is a respected academic and scholar. And then what we'll find later is when they ask him questions about the church and its growth and its statistics and its demographics, he's like, well, I'm not a scholar, I'm an apostle now. And so I throw all that stuff away. You won't get this point until you see him do that later. But we wanted to play that now so you'll remember it later, that they want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to be respected as lawyers and doctors and academics.
Critical thinkers.
Critical thinkers, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that the public will think they're smart and respectable people.
Yeah.
But they literally shut that. I want to swear they shut that shit off when they actually govern the church, and he actually literally says that.
Yeah.
A little bit later. All right. Did you want to say something, Gerardo?
No.
Okay.
Let's.
RFM, any quick response to that?
Yeah, nothing says academic excellence like Texas Tech and Rick's College.
I think he was a professor at Arkansas. Is that any better?
I'm not going to say.
We don't want to offend our Arkansans.
No, we don't.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and now we're actually going to jump to his talk.
Thank you. I am honored beyond description to be here with all of you today. As representatives of the Fourth Estate, I appreciate your work in relaying the important stories of our day. Sadly, the news of our day is filled with heartache, including the tragic events and the loss of life, most recently in Texas. We mourn with those who mourn, and we pray for all those impacted by this senseless act of violence. My prayer and my blessing is that we will be guided, comforted, and helped in our important work, and that victims, families, and nations might be granted the peace that surpasses all understanding, the peace that comes from Jesus Christ.
Did any of you, so he's clearly talking about there, for those who are watching this later, with this week, there was a really awful, horrific mass shooting at a elementary school in Texas where half a dozen
19 students and 2 teachers.
10-year-old students and a couple teachers were all killed in a mass shooting. There have been more mass shootings in 2022 than days. So more than one mass shooting a day has happened in the United States in 2022. He starts off by lamenting the violence. I had some strong reactions to that. Does anybody want to share theirs before I share mine?
You go first.
All right. Well, so I want to be clear, because a lot of times Mormon Stories listeners feel like we are Democrat or progressive and that we don't like Republicans or conservatives. I want to say again, that's not how I feel, and that's not what we want to be conveyed. I'm a registered Republican in Utah, mainly because I want my vote has the most influence in the primaries as a Republican. But I believe there's good and bad to both parties. I'm not partisan. Now, with that disclaimer, I want to say I understand the Constitution, the right to bear arms. This comment I'm about to make is not about that. And so I don't want this to be taken as an anti-Republican, anti-guns sort of statement. But if we just talk about mass shootings, I just want to say that that's one of some really significant social problems in the United States. And for me, when you think about the role of a prophet, seer, and revelator, the fact that they have a global responsibility to really help the world, that's the type of leadership I would want to see from a prophet, seer, and revelator, is some sort of solution or efforts or rhetoric or statements or even lobbying that would lead to a reduction in things like mass shootings. Right?
Right.
Because that, that's a major issue. Little children being killed, Jesus was pretty clear about, harming children, right? And my biggest problem is, where does the church spend its money? Where does it spend its lobbying efforts? It spends it to defeat same-sex marriage and to lobby to minimize the rights of LGBT people. That's where they spend their money in their lobbying efforts. And so instead of showing leadership in a very important issue, they've been silent on that. Have they ever made a public statement about guns or mass shootings? Or is there any evidence that they've ever lobbied to reduce mass shootings? I don't think so. And instead, they're just saying Jesus is the answer and we pray for them. And so this is an area of I don't know if I'm being fair, but that was my reaction. It's like, where's the leadership? Where's the prophetic leadership on an issue of real importance?
Yeah.
To me, they're missing in action.
Yeah. I agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think people are done with the phrase, "I'll pray for you."
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like, I think we're done. I think we're done with that. I think we need you not to pray if you're not getting any guidance, and just listen and do something about it.
Yeah. RFM, I want to get you in because I know this is a complicated issue, but I do want to know if you have any reactions about that or not. And it's fine if you don't.
Well, I do briefly. Obviously, it's a very complex issue. I don't claim to have all the answers. It is my sense, however, that as horrible, as absolutely horrible as these mass shootings are, I think these are actually a symptom rather than the underlying problem. Beyond that doesn't detract from how horrible they are, and that we should try and do what we can do, everything we can do to keep them from happening. But I do think those are the leaves of the tree and not the roots. I do want to give credit to Elder Bednar for mentioning it, because this is different. This is different than what I have seen in General Conference for decades, which is where General Conference appears to occur in a vacuum. And there's no reference to anything going on outside in the world. There are some exceptions to that, but as a general rule, there's nothing happening outside of the conference center. They're just talking and giving the same old talk. So I want to give him credit for mentioning it. I want to give him credit for talking about Jesus in association with it. I want to give him credit for taking the opportunity, because I think this was a good move on his part, to be able to appear apostolic and like the leader of a church in the things he said about it. But of course, what he says about it doesn't change anything, but it gives him a chance to look good. By the way, I want to say another good thing about him, that I think the person who was doing his makeup for this did a really good job. Elder Bednar looks almost lifelike in this appearance.
Thanks, RFM. And we really want at Mormon Stories to be fair and balanced. So
Yeah.
I love that you're highlighting positive. We want to do that too. And I think that's a fair point. I just would love to see money spent in lobbying efforts more on important social issues that really matter and less on taking rights away from LGBT people.
Yeah, on the other side of that, look what happened when they actually said something about needles.
Yeah.
I mean, how are they going to say anything about guns? Because now the church is in a position where it has so many disparate elements that are part of its membership that it feels that it can't say anything one way or another without stepping on toes and creating schisms. I was shocked. I don't know. I think you might have been too. I'm imagining that the leaders of the church were shocked that when President Nelson quite belatedly recommends that members of the church get vaccinated, that all of a sudden they've got a protest on their hands of sizable proportions.
Yeah. And that's addressed later in this talk. A little bit. Yeah.
He downplays it, but yeah.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the next part of his talk.
I'm humbled that you would take time out of your schedules to be here this afternoon. The last time a senior leader of our church spoke at the press club was in 2000, President Gordon B. Hinckley. It's good to be back. I was here in Washington just last month as we opened to the public our temple on the north side of the Capitol Beltway. You likely are familiar with this beautiful building. It has been an iconic landmark in this community for 5 decades. Some of you attended the media briefings and tours on April the 18th. Approximately 150 journalists attended and have provided extensive global coverage. In addition, the package put together by Ed O'Keefe, Ed Forgatston, and their colleagues at CBS Sunday Morning was broadcast on Easter, a most significant day for all Christians. We were pleased to explain that the temple is not a large cathedral, but a series of floors and rooms that symbolically represent a spiritual journey back to the presence of God. As our members move from the ground level to the elevated areas of the structure and receive instruction about God's plan for his children, the ultimate destination of that symbolic journey is the celestial room, a representation of our heavenly home. So far, hundreds of thousands of people have toured the temple. If you have not yet had the opportunity to visit the temple, please see me or members of our team after this meeting, and we.
So, RFM, let's have you go first. Any reactions to kind of how he described the temple and what it means to Mormons?
I think he does a really good job here. I think that's exactly how I would have done it if I were in his shoes as an apostle. It's how I would have recommended that he do it, because that is the overall generalization of what happens in the temple. That's the whole point of the temple, is taking you from that journey from the lower levels up to the celestial room. Mm-hmm. So up to there, I think he's doing a great job.
Okay. Any reactions, Gerardo and Jen, from that description?
I think my reaction is that most members that I know of struggle to go to the temple or to want to go to the temple. Very close family members I know
who are active and faithful.
Yeah, who are active and faithful and really believe in the church have real issues with the temple ceremony. I mean, they might not say like that, but they just try to avoid going as much as possible.
Yeah.
And a lot of them happen to be women. And so, and I know that at least in my state growing up, after the temple was dedicated, there are constant talks in sacrament meeting about members. You should go to the temple. The temple is empty. People are not going to the temple. The temple is going to be closed a lot of days of the week, more days of the week. If we don't have enough people to fill in the ceremonies. So, and I know it happens all around Mexico too. So it's just interesting how Elder Bednar wants to portray the temple as something so sacred and so important for Mormons, when in reality, that's not how it really plays out.
Yeah, I think the church has always wanted it to be a spiritual place. But from a very young age, my dad would always say to me, I don't feel the spirit in the temple. I wish you could go there to meditate. And later they talk about that as a place to meditate. But literally, if you stay in this, when I was growing up, if you stay in the celestial room too long, they ask you to leave.
Yeah.
You don't go to meditate. You go to watch a film, to do the handshakes, to do the arm waving thing, to get baptisms for the dead, marriage for the dead. it's not spirituality is I think you make a great point, Gerardo. It's not core to people's experience, although I think the church sincerely wants it to be. And I think all of us were on the hamster wheel of each time we went to the temple, like, man, maybe this time I'll feel good. Maybe this time I won't fall asleep. Right. Like that's how it was for me. It's like, can I not fall asleep?
Yeah.
This time.
Yeah. I think it was just disturbing for me.
The temple?
Yeah.
Did you not love it?
I know. It was kind of traumatizing, actually. I had a really bad first experience. So,
yeah.
But it is important to say that while we were members of the church, believing members, we probably wouldn't talk about it. Like that's how we would feel.
No.
But to other members, we would say, "Oh, it's amazing! It's the greatest thing." We were really excited when other family members were going to enter for the first time. It's not until after when you start thinking about it, and really think about what your feelings were.
Yeah, like Margie never went back. We got married in the temple, and then literally we were still active. We were active from 93 to 2014. So that's 11 years. No, that's 21 years. 21 years. And she never went back unless like someone was getting married, because it wasn't spiritual for her. Again, it wasn't spiritual for me. The thing that I noticed is they're leaving out something really important. I don't think the temple is really about spiritual growth for the members. It's a way to force members to pay tithing and to obey. It's a way of boundary maintenance and of identity maintenance and of obedience maintenance. Of course, they don't think of it that way, so they're not going to say it. But I think we all agree that's what the temple is. You can't go to your own wedding. You can't go on a mission. You can't see your kids get married in the temple unless you obey the rules and pay the tithing. And so I think the main purpose of the temple is to force obedience and to force members to give the church money. And of course, I don't expect them to say that.
Shame and control, I would say.
It is. I think that's a major thing of it. The other major thing they don't mention is it's the only way people get to heaven. And he's going to talk later, Gerardo, you highlight this. He's going to talk later about how we're not a church of works. But what the temple literally represents is you don't go to heaven unless you get a Mormon baptism. And so Mormons have to spend a big chunk of their lives getting baptized for dead people, because all those Christian baptisms don't count, right? And all those marriages performed, billions of marriages every year, right? They don't count. You have to have a Mormon marriage in a Mormon temple to be sealed to your spouse in the afterlife. So there's this ordinances for the living and the dead part of it that is a core reason those temples exist. And he's not going to bring that up to the press, because he's basically saying all your ordinances are worthless. All your baptisms and marriages are literally worthless in the eyes of God. So we, the Mormons, have to go do all your work for you by proxy work for the dead. And so I think that's why they don't mention that, right?
Yeah.
Is that fair? Am I being unfair?
I mean, that's how it is.
It is true, but they'll never actually tell people that all your baptisms and marriages are worthless in the sight of God.
Yeah.
RFM, you're probably going to say I'm being unfair.
No, I was just going to reiterate. That's why I think he did such a good job with that statement.
Because he avoided those issues. Well, RFM, we love having you on. This is so great. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next clip.
For those of you who may not be familiar with our church, we believe the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is Christ's New Testament church restored. The organization of the church is the same today as existed in the primitive church, with a foundation of apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone. In the early 1800s, Joseph Smith was a prophet of God through whom the authority and doctrine of the ancient church were reestablished. By the gift and power of God, he translated an ancient text known as the Book of Mormon, which recounts the visit of Jesus Christ to the Americas and stands with the Bible as a second scriptural witness of the Savior's reality and divinity. We believe that a succession of prophets has continued since Joseph Smith, and today our prophet is Russell M. Nelson.
All right. So that was kind of like main beliefs of the Mormon Church. So I'll ask each of you. Jen, we'll have you go first. Anything catch your ear, catch your eye? In that?
It caught my ear that you said that the book was translated.
What book?
The Book of Mormon.
What's
that
wrong-
Joseph Smith translated.
What's wrong with that?
He used that word.
What's wrong with that?
Because they're trying to now say that he didn't translate it was revealed to him.
Or a revelation?
Yeah, through the stone
Okay.
in the hat. Because people are starting to know that he didn't translate it.
Yeah.
And so now they have to come up with a different narrative, but he still said translate.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
So from your mind, that's maybe not fully honest.
yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Okay. That caught your eye.
Yeah.
Gerardo, what caught your eye or ear?
It's a really good first, restoration lesson.
Yeah.
Pretty good summary.
Yeah. I was wondering if he was going to mention Joseph Smith's name at all.
Oh,
right. That maybe that he would just conveniently, but he did. He mentioned Joseph Smith. He mentioned the Book of Mormon. He mentioned Jesus visiting America, and he mentioned modern day prophets. I do have a question about, is the Mormon Church the same organization that Jesus organized? Like, is this the primitive church?
That's what Mormons really believe. I think I believed it.
I did too. I did. I don't now, but I did.
Like, we're a freaking corporation.
Just like I believe the temple was a spiritual place. I did, but I don't now.
Yeah, Jesus didn't.
Now that I take time to think about it and really step back from all of it.
Yeah, like just this. Did Jesus build temples and do proxy work for the dead in his temples?
No.
Was that part of the original church?
1 Corinthians 15:29, baby.
I don't think Jesus was a polygamist either, that I remember. But
Mary and Martha, why did he hang out with them all the time? Read the Gospel of Luke.
RFM, is the modern corporate Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints the same as the primitive church? What's your answer to that, RFM?
Well, no, of course it's not, because no church is going to be like the church Jesus organized, because Jesus never organized a church.
That's a problem.
That's the first problem.
That's a big problem.
I like that.
Yeah, I think our friend Randy would agree with you.
But I did want to say, I thought this was where Elder Bednar shone the best.
Yeah.
Because like you said, is he even going to mention Joseph Smith, or is he going to go right into this long, monotonous list of all the wonderful things that the church is doing in the world today? This is what I expect an apostle to do, is to go in front of a crowd of non-members, publicly teach what Mormonism is about. And he did that, and he didn't shy away from any of the more controversial aspects, whether it's Jesus in America or Joseph Smith translating the Book of Mormon, or that he was a prophet. We got a prophet today. He said all the main points, and he said it without being ashamed or trying to dodge an issue. And I think this was a really good thing for him to do. I do think that if I had been advising him, I would have told him, Elder Bednar, this is so important, and it's not that long. You need to commit this to memory so you can speak it with your eyes up. And I should bring my eyes up as I'm doing this. with your eyes up and toward the audience, and not off of your note cards. Because what he ends up doing is, at the end of every sentence where he's making a statement of religious conviction, he doesn't finish here, which would be stronger. He finishes with his eyes down, because he's got to pick up the next line. And that ends up signaling weakness and lack of conviction. I'm not saying that's what he really has at his heart. That's why I would have told him, just memorize it, say it all straight out. And if you can't memorize it all, make sure that the final line of every sentence is said to the audience and not said down here on the paper.
Man, it almost sounds like you're a trial attorney or something.
Or a director or stage manager or
or
general pain in the ass.
Theater experience.
Yeah.
I love it. All right. Thanks, RFM. Okay, let's go ahead and go to the next clip.
Often the world works from the outside in. Changing a person's circumstances and environment may be considered the best method of changing that person. This approach certainly is important, as I will illustrate in just a few minutes. But God typically works from the inside out through a spiritual rebirth. If a person allows God to change his or her heart, then that person is empowered in remarkable ways to change his or her circumstances and environment. Now, both temporal change from the outside in and spiritual change from the inside out are needed and useful in different situations. But we have learned that a person with a new heart, a person changed from the inside out, serves and blesses family, friends, neighbors, congregations, and communities in powerful ways. They learn to see each other for who they are and therefore treat each other accordingly. This is how our faith community has expanded to all parts of the world, including the Middle East, Eastern Asia, Eastern Europe. For members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, drawing closer to God through our temple worship is life-changing.
All right, I just had some pretty strong reactions myself. Any of you have any strong reactions you want to share? Gerardo, no. Jen, anything stuck out to you?
Yeah, why don't you go first?
Okay.
I'm still thinking.
Okay. So recently, Brad Wilcox, they found a clip of him doing kind of that inside speak with some of his audience, where he basically said, if you don't have the church and if you're a secular person and there's like a airplane crash, you're going to like trample over the sick people to get out and save yourself. It was basically this idea that only Mormons or religious people have charity and are kind. And if you don't have a religion or if you're secular, you just are going to stab and shank your neighbor for self-gain. You know what I mean? And I don't think he's necessarily saying that, but I thought a lot about this theme that he shares of outside in change versus inside out change. He returns to it many times during this talk, and he ends with this theme. And the problem I have with it is that, number one, it reinforces this idea that only religious people are the best. Religious people are the most spiritual. Religious people are the most charitable and the most altruistic. And if you're secular or non-Mormon, because I think he thinks Mormons do inside out change the best, if you're not Mormon, you're not going to be really spiritual and really charitable. And one of my problems with that, other than the bigotry that I think, the non-Mormon bigotry or the anti-secular bigotry that this supports, I also question the idea whether the Mormon church really nurtures inside out change. You're already nodding your head, Jen. Why is that?
Yeah. Well, that's the same thing I thought. I thought it was beautiful because I kind of believe this, that, finding God, whatever you want to call your God, to any individual, finding God within yourself, and then finding that love for yourself and, that love from whatever source is yours. And then go about your life with empathy and love of that same kind for everyone else is beautiful. And I love that. And I think that was beautiful how he said that. But then he also said there's this outside source that you got to take into consideration, which I guess is like the prophets and the church and the outline and and then that brings all of that's so wrong into question too, like into a person. And it doesn't need that. Like if you just went with the first part of what you said, totally love that. I think that was great what he said, but then he has to ruin it
Well,
with adding the extra.
Yeah. And I just, I'm going to use you as an example, Gerardo, if you don't mind. Like, okay, what does inside out change mean? I would think that what it means is you go within. Like Jesus said, the kingdom of God was within.
Yeah.
You listen to your heart. You listen to your soul. You look within. You figure out what's good and righteous and true for you is, and then you transform, right? But like Gerardo, in your case, if you're being raised in the Mormon church, do you feel like you were encouraged to look within to figure out what felt right and true to you is and what love is for you, and that then you became externally what your inner voice told you to be? Was that your experience? Inside out change?
No. Well, he was always looking at whenever you have a question about what you should do in any situation, is always asking yourself, what would Jesus do? What would the prophet do? What would a person that fits the ideal Mormon would do? And then, that's how you answer your question. So, or looking at an outside source, always like asking God or asking your bishop, your stake president, whatever.
And for those who don't know your story, what did your inside tell you was love and was good as you were growing up? What did your
Yeah.
inside tell you?
Well, that I was gay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then what was love?
Yeah. That I was attracted to people of my same sex.
And who did
that,
you love eventually?
Yeah, my husband.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what Inside Out told you,
Right.
right?
Right.
But then the church, and it's ironic that this is in the context of a discussion about the temple, because how would the church have punished you if you followed your Inside Out inklings, right?
Yeah, they would excommunicate me
and kick you out of the temple and remove your
Mhm.
membership, and
Right.
you couldn't go on a mission, and you'd be embarrassed by your family, and you couldn't attend your own sister's wedding if she got married. So like, is that inside out change, or is that outside in coercion? And I don't mean to like be mean spirited here.
No, but
But
it's a good point.
Is that-
I think it's a fair point for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the temple is a symbol of coercion, of outside in coercion,
Yeah.
not of inside out authentic transformation.
hmm But they tell it to us like it's going to be an experience where you're going to, from the inside out, learn something new, and you'll find all these new truths and everything. We all go there trying to get that, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. It's not any of those things. It's just a place for them to control and get what they need.
And I don't want to belabor this point, but as I've interacted with tens of thousands of people who have left the Mormon church, what I'm told repeatedly is that the church took them away from themselves. The church taught them to quiet themselves. The church, them leaving the church was the first time they were ever actually able to look inside, figure out what they love, who they are, what they value, what they care about, and to follow it. RFM, we haven't brought you in yet. Do you have anything to add to this sort of branch of the conversation?
I do get concerned when language like this is used by church leaders. And I think you've hit on most of the reasons why. And that's because it has nothing to do with how the church actually functions. The church is a very legalistic religion. And by that, I mean the LDS church. And you've done a great job of talking about how we are never encouraged to go from the inside out. We are told to look to the general authorities and the leaders of the church to dictate to us how it is that we are to live our lives. We are allowed personal revelation only to the extent that it agrees with what the leaders are telling us. And in summary, I would say that what I see when I hear Elder Bednar saying this is I see a legalistic religion masquerading as a charismatic faith. And the church is anything but a charismatic faith. He's actually sort of pretending to be a born-again Christian.
Right.
For purposes of, I don't know, scoring points, because that is not what this church is and never has been, regardless of the fact that a lot of that theology is in the Book of Mormon. That was left behind many, many years ago.
Yeah. A lot of heads nodding here in the studio, RFM.
That was awesome.
Thank you.
That was good.
Thanks, RFM. Okay, well, Jen, we're going to ask you to pay particular attention to this next part, because now he's going to address women in the church. Are you ready, Jen?
Oh, great. Yep.
Are you
I'm
excited?
ready.
Are you excited?
I am. I hope
Okay.
it's good.
Here's the church's statement on women in the church. We want people to not only pay attention to what was mentioned, but maybe what wasn't mentioned. Okay, here we go.
On the issue of women in the church, our church membership, like many other organizations, is comprised of a female majority. We have one of the oldest women's organizations in the world, known as the Relief Society, organized 180 years ago. Today, the Relief Society has approximately 7.1.
Oh, I don't know why it stopped there. I don't think it was supposed to stop there. But Jen, let's just have you react to that. you're in the majority. Like, that's pretty good, right?
Yeah. So it's interesting if I'm in the majority, how there are no women leaders. Just wondering why that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel bad that this clip cuts short, and I'm sure it's my
Should
fault.
we just mention the stats that he gives?
Yeah. So,
so-
I'll do you want to read them, or?
Yeah,
I've got
I can read them.
Okay.
So the stats that he brings up, can you put them on the screen? Just, I think you have them there, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
I feel bad we didn't get this clip right. It's my
Okay.
fault.
7.1 million members of the Relief Society. And then he says there's 31,000 congregation, and this theme of 31,000 congregations, he's going to keep repeating. But then he says for every congregation, there's one Relief Society president. So that's 31,000 Relief Society presidents. And then he says, and they have 2 counselors. So when you multiply it, you're going to get 93,000 relief, like, women leaders in the church.
Yeah. And then he goes on to say that everyone is supposed to teach, minister, and serve, men and women. And so, yeah. So church loves women. Women are good. I don't know what else to say about that, Jen. Women, look at you. There are 93,000 of you leading throughout the church worldwide. 7.1 million women. That's not true.
That's leading worldwide in a class. They're leading a class. That's what the Relief Society is.
They're leading casserole delivery.
It's a class within the church. It's a class.
No,
it doesn't lead the ward. It doesn't lead.
There's service projects. There's casserole
John.
delivery. I don't know what goes on in Relief Society. Is it just a class?
Well, I think that's
not leadership of the church. That's what goes on in.
Don't you
doesn't
organize
go on
like
in
ward
Relief Society.
activities or things
No.
like that? What do you do at Relief Society?
We make it all happen. Like, we do all the work. We're the whole reason this whole church is running. But no, there's no leadership. There's no leadership. There's no leaders. There's no authority. There's just not. I know that they like to swing it different ways, and they like try to make us feel like there is, but there's not.
I think you're saying, like, important decision making always comes back to whoever is above
the priesthood
women.
leader.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, there's never going to be a woman that has the final say.
No.
When a Relief Society president wants to call 2 counselors,
Mhm.
what has to happen first, Jen?
Oh.
The bishop has to approve them.
So they can't even call their own counselors without.
No, they can
male
pray
approval.
about it. They can pray about it.
Right.
And come up with some names.
Yeah.
But the decisions are male.
Yeah.
They're priesthood holder
Yeah.
people, our decisions. And if we're bringing up the Relief Society, I just want to also say, historically, the Relief Society was a woman-run society. It was it had its own budget. It didn't have priesthood authority over it. It was its own society, separate from the church. And then the priesthood and the leaders, as it grew, decided that they were going to then take over it. And so I have a lot of feelings there. A lot of stuff that I never knew about, a lot of historical stuff that is wrong. And definitely, I don't think he should be bragging about anything with women in the church.
And you've already made the point, Jen, but what's he not admitting? If we talk about being completely honest, what should he have acknowledged if he's being fully honest?
There's no women leadership
At
any level of the church. There's none.
What about the auxiliary? I can see a Mormon apologist saying, well, there's the General Relief Society board, there's the General Young Women's board.
But who do they answer to? Are they the final say in anything? No, never, anywhere, nowhere.
Yeah.
Not even in eternity.
Yeah.
So.
And this is mind-boggling to me that in 2022, in a Western in any civilized country that a religion is allowed to discriminate so blatantly against such over half of its own members. And that like everybody's just like, oh yeah, that's what churches do. They just exclude women. Sorry, women. You know, even gay Mormon men who are like denounced as evil are allowed to serve in the priesthood, but not women.
Yeah. And then they say that this priesthood, I don't know, one of the reasons they have to, you know, make the decisions is like this discernment that they get with this priesthood. And I haven't seen much of that. I haven't seen much of that discernment as, you know, we look at what happens to people and within wards and things like that. There's not a discernment.
Yeah.
So it's just making women feel like they can't make a decision without an approval of a male is ludicrous.
Yeah. But also the church is real. If you think about just sexual abuse, child abuse in the church, sexual abuse in the church, rape in the church, all the major social problems, LGBT stuff, financial transparency. I just have to think that if women were co-leaders with men in this church, it would be a very different church.
Oh, for sure.
And a more Christ-like church, more Christ-like.
I believe we would have given more than $9.6 million if we're worth $150 billion, if it was run by women. I kind of feel that.
So the church,
because we're more, I don't know. Yeah, I feel it.
Humanitarian aid.
Yeah.
There'd be more humanitarian aid. There'd be more financial transparency.
Yeah.
Less child abuse.
Yeah.
Right?
If the Relief Society was in charge of the Relief Society money.
Of the budget.
Of the budget.
How about of the tithing budget?
Yeah. Of the tithing budget. Exactly. Like there would be a difference. I believe there would be a difference.
Do you remember Delane Dalton?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Elaine Dalton?
Yeah. I recently heard from someone who was friends with her that she supports gay marriage and she wishes the church would do gay sealings in the temple. So, so imagine someone like she was in a high position in the church, is highly regarded by a lot of members because she was very well known for being in the first, the president of the Young Women's, and imagine someone like that could make decisions.
Yeah. I just can't believe there'd be
that's true, Gerardo.
The LGBT bigotry, or even just this gun control thing. Like I don't know. So RFM, we want to get you in on the women's issue. I know that you're not officially a woman, but we still want to give you a chance to jump in if you want to say anything about his comments on women.
Well, this is where it gets into the theme of only talking about positive things. And it really doesn't even follow. So he talks about the role of women in the church. So we're going to talk about the fact that the Relief Society exists, that it's old as an organization, that there's a lot of women in it, that we've got women in the local wards, and we've got lots of Relief Society presidents. And then he's going to stop. What he's not going to say is what everybody who's a member of the church knows, which is that, yes, women can have and do have leadership positions in the church. But there's two things that go along with that. First off, they never have a leadership position over a man. Not once. Unless I'm mistaken, maybe somebody knows of one and they could correct me. But a woman never has a leadership position over a man. She can have leadership positions over other women, young women, little women. And no, that's not a literary reference. The only time that women get to have any leadership over a person with a PP is if they're under 12 years old. And I'm talking about primary, right?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing, is that no woman in the church has any leadership position over any man, no matter how high up they might be in the church, the woman. And the other part of that goes the other way, which is, yes, every woman who's in a leadership position in the church has a man above her that she has to go to get authority to do basically whatever it is she wants to do, including, like you mentioned, calling counselors.
Yeah. Yeah, well said, RFM. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And I think we covered it. All right. Well, let's now go on to race. He's going to tackle race. So isn't this great? He's got an opportunity to tackle race and racism and Mormonism and its racist past. Let's see what he has to say about race.
On the issue of race, we know and teach that each of us is a beloved son or daughter of God who loves all of his children equally. Last month, Reverend Dr. Amos Brown spoke at our media events for the Washington, D.C. Temple Open House. As you may know, excuse me, Dr. Brown is a prominent civil rights leader and holds a leadership role in the NAACP. He also leads the Third Baptist Church in San Francisco. Though not a member of our faith, he is a tremendous friend of the church. In 2019, Derek Johnson, president and CEO of the NAACP, met with President Nelson and took significant steps to bring our organizations together to model for the world how two unexpected organizations can collaborate to foster greater mutual respect and unity. We are working together to support community projects in major U.S. cities, provide academic scholarships for underserved populations, and initiate this summer the first ever Amos C. Brown Fellowship to support.
Okay, so again, I didn't get the codes quite right on that, but he goes on to say that they're offering scholarships to people of color and travel fellowships to go to Ghana. Yeah, so somebody joked in the comments that the church has a few black friends. I think they were trying to joke about that.
Brad Wilcox.
I'm going to start this time with RFM. RFM. So yeah, we've got a relationship with the NAACP now. All people are children of God. We want to be mutual respectful for all. The church is doing service projects in communities, and they're offering scholarships and fellowships. That's it. What do you have to say?
How do you say anything bad about that? That's a good thing, right? I think it's a very positive thing. And I do note that Elder Bednar can't drop enough names of black leaders in the NAACP. He only has time apparently for 2 of them. But I remember back in 2017, that first press conference that President Nelson, I'm pretty sure, did with the NAACP. And Elder Rasband was up there too. And they were having a big press event. And then they were done making their announcements and holding hands. And then they went back behind the 2 doors. And at that point, I thought, wow, this is really remarkable. You got the NAACP and you got the LDS Church, and they're having a press event of unity for the public. And when they went back behind those doors, I thought, well, how much is this going to cost the church? So within a few weeks after that, I was not surprised to hear that the church was announcing a rather sizable donation to, I think it was some Black History Museum and the creation of it. And I thought, well, there's the first drop in the bucket. Because I don't think they're getting the NAACP to join hands with them because the NAACP is ignorant of the church's racist past. I think there has to be some quid pro quo there. And we know what the church is getting for it, which is the public press events with the NAACP leaders. And I just expect that the NAACP wants to get something in return, because I don't think it's redounding to the NAACP's benefit to have these public associations with the LDS Church. So having said all of that, I was talking with Gerardo earlier today, and he made an excellent point about a particular word that Elder Bednar used when he was talking about this, and how this revealed a lot about what Elder Bednar knows and is not saying. It's all the stuff that we know about the LDS Church's past with regards to race relations that he's not talking about. It's not my show, but Gerardo, would you mind telling the audience about that?
Yeah, he says two unexpected organizations are working together. I was thinking, why are they unexpected to be working together? If the church has been fighting racism since its beginnings, like, I can't remember his name, the 70 told us in his talk, why would they be at odds with and WACP. And then he later adds, Elder Bednar adds and says, that almost like saying like two opposite organizations can come together and work in unity. It's like so weird to me. Almost like he's talking about an LGBT coalition. And I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, so he's not mentioning the church's racist past. They're doing nothing, he's ignoring the racism in the Book of Mormon, that dark skin is a curse to make people loathsome, which is in the Book of Mormon. He doesn't acknowledge that we literally fought the civil rights movement, condemned Martin Luther King as a communist, and opposed the civil rights movement and the priesthood ban until 1978. And of course, it's unfair to expect, the church has changed in a lot of those ways. So yeah, you wouldn't expect them in a PR junket to mention all that, but he is not mentioning it. But then RFM, your point, I think is 1,000% valid. The church paid for those. Those are PR ops that the church paid for. The church gave millions of dollars to the NAACP. And let's just face it, the NAACP has a price and you can buy their support with enough money. Yeah. And I'm not saying that they would do a photo op with everyone.
Yeah, I don't think they do a photo op with the Ku Klux Klan at this point, and there's been enough time that's gone by. But yeah, absolutely, they know what the church's history is.
Bar. You're saying they have a bar?
Yeah, there's a standard there. No, I'm not trying to. There is a standard. I don't think that they would be linking hands with President Nelson if the church still had a priesthood ban in place. Let's put it that way.
Right.
But I do want to say that when Elder Bednar, when he doesn't talk about the priesthood ban, what he does for everybody who knows about it, and is there anybody in that whole room who doesn't know about the priesthood ban?
No.
By not talking about it, what he's doing is making it so much louder.
Yeah.
By not talking about it. And if he just, and this would be my advice to him, Elder Bednar, I'm going to, you give me a call. We'll talk before your next public appearance. Give a nod to it at least. Say, we have not had the perfect record in our church with race relations, and we regret that, and that was wrong. But we're moving forward, and we're trying to do better, and we encourage all of us to try and do better in our relationships with other race and learning to live together. That would have knocked it out of the park, I think, much better than just ignoring it completely and hoping and praying to Heavenly Father. That's a little under the banner of heaven joke. And praying to Heavenly Father that nobody's going to bring it up and nobody's going to notice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's purchased PR. And then the other thing is all these scholarships and fellowships. So often when the church does these service projects, they're either PR, like they want to make sure everybody knows. We're going to talk about this later. Like Jesus said, do your alms in private, right? So why is the church bragging about what it's doing?
No, Jesus says, do your alms with helping hands t-shirts.
With yellow vests.
Yes.
That you put
That's
up.
in there. That's in the JST. I looked it up.
But it's hard because we're going to criticize the church for being wealthy. But then when the church does service, they have to tell us about it or we wouldn't know about it. But then when they tell us about it, we complain that they're doing their service. About it. So in some ways, we have to be careful that we don't, put the church in a position where they can't win.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's weird that they brag about this stuff.
I know.
Well, when it's in a position where they're giving to something that they need to apologize about,
right,
then that's where it's kind of going too far. Like the race in the priesthood needs an apostle to stand up and blatantly say, we were wrong.
Yeah.
That was wrong. We apologize. We need to stop all necessary avenues of this being out in the world. When there's an apology that needs to be made by the prophet, that's where it's like, no for me.
Otherwise, it's almost like cover up, right? Because they're talking about, we donated all this money and expecting people to not know why they're doing it.
That is such a great point, Jen. Thanks for bringing it home. What's blaring out here is that the church has never apologized for its racist past to this day in 2022.
For the ban.
For the priesthood ban and for its racist past, for the racist statements of past prophets, seers, and revelators that were published in church publications.
They've disavowed them.
They've disavowed them, but not apologized for them.
Yeah.
And then they haven't fixed the Book of Mormon and the racism there. They haven't fixed the Book of Abraham and the Book of Moses and the racism there.
Yep.
So they haven't fixed it.
Yep.
And they haven't apologized to the Lamanites for teaching them that their skin is dark because of their ancestors were wicked. Like, there's atonement that needs to be made. And so that's a great point, Jen. These PR ops that the church buys, and RFM, this is your point. It just screams out not only a lack of acknowledgement of the past, but a lack of still not fixing the racial problems in the church.
Yep.
Right. Then they're going to take those contributions for the photo ops that they have purchased, I believe, and I hope that's not too cynically said, but I think it's pretty realistic that they're going to take that money that they paid for those photo ops, and then later on, I have got a feeling they're going to get transferred into what Elder Bednar is going to talk about as the money that the church has spent on humanitarian projects.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. I love it. Okay, this is great analysis, everybody. I'm loving this team, and I'm grateful for it. I also just want to thank, we just got a super chat donation from H. Benzula. For those of you joining us on YouTube, if you value, this programming, you can show that by clicking on the $ in the chat button and donating. If you're on Facebook and watching us live, you can click on the stars feature, and your donations just go to support our program. So thank you all so much for those donations. Now, Gerardo, we're going to go to your favorite topic, which is LGBT stuff. Elder Bednar is going to tell us how awesome the church is with LGBT people, and we're glad we have you to kind of give your analysis. You ready?
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
On the issue of our LGBTQ members and friends, you may be familiar with the church's 2015 role in passing legislation in Utah to protect LGBTQ individuals from discrimination in housing, employment, and other rights. They, in turn, support securing the freedom of belief that we hold so dear. And we have continued to build on our accomplishments in Utah. This year, a bill in Arizona was introduced that would provide similar and even expanded protections for LGBTQ people. And we are working with other states on similar initiatives. Such legislation is the result of positive relationships fostered over time.
All right, Gerardo, what do you think?
You should also know that at the federal level.
Oh, sorry, there's more.
We have been working with our LGBTQ allies to advance legislation of a similar nature. We are proud to stand with our LGBTQ brothers and sisters, some of whom are with us today in this important effort. It is hard work and an objective worth fighting for. While we may not agree on everything, we surely are building a foundation of mutual respect and understanding.
Man, it's super hard work, Gerardo. It's so hard to work with you guys. It's like almost impossible, but we're doing our best.
He's talking about Troy Williams, I think. I've heard he can be difficult for the church. But yeah, so I think someone like that's not very informed about what he's talking about would be like, oh, that's amazing. The church is helping LGBT people. I think we've covered this topic multiple times on Mormon Stories, but these legislations that he's talking about really are not to protect LGBT rights, are to protect the church. So what is happening, and Elder Oaks talked about it pretty openly and candidly, and he said when he went to University of Virginia last year.
And we can add that in the show notes because we did an episode on his visit to the University of Virginia. Yeah, keep going.
Elder Oaks said he pretty much admits that LGBT rights are gaining traction in the courts. So basically, LGBT people are suing and then getting their rights through litigation. That's how gay marriage was passed. That's why gay marriage is legal in the United States, because not because of the church or because of legislation. It was because a case was taken to the Supreme Court. Then we have Bostock that happened, I believe, last year, which gave LGBT rights at a federal level. Uh, Protections against discrimination in employment. And there's several others like this. So Elder Oaks admits that the church is realizing that this is happening, and that they're not these Supreme Court rulings are not considering religious exemptions. In fact, the Supreme Court is avoiding talking about how this will play out for religious institutions, especially religious institutions that have secular endeavors like BYU and the church, the BYU schools, and the businesses that the church owns, that the church would like to keep discriminating in this secular institutions. But because the Supreme Court rulings, they're really looking at, the church is getting scared, and Elder Oaks pretty much says that. And Elder Oaks says, please, LGBT people, stop suing, stop going to the courts, let's compromise in legislation. So let's pass laws that protect your rights, but it also gives us exemptions so we don't have to follow those laws, and we can keep discriminating against LGBT people. And that's the legislation that he's talking about that was passed in Utah, that is called the Utah Compromise. And that's the legislation that they're trying to pass in Arizona. And then the one that he's talking about, the national level, is the Freedom for All Act that the church has been supporting. That is pretty much a rewrite of the Equality Act, that will pretty much give this rights that, in my opinion, LGBT people already have. Biden already signed a executive order, but the reason they're trying to pass it is so they can have exemptions that are currently not written in the law.
Yeah. And can I just say how outrageous it is to me that the church is like, okay, we'll begrudgingly allow gay people to not be fired from their jobs or evicted from their houses. We'll let that slide as long as you allow us to keep discriminating against LGBT people.
As long as you allow us to keep doing that same stuff, kicking people out of their houses at BYU when they are in same-sex relationships, losing their employment,
but we want credit for it,
right?
As being non-bigots.
Yeah,
we'll begrudgingly allow gay people to not be kicked out of their homes or not be fired if you let us still discriminate, but only if you shower us with praise for being so progressive with our lovely gay friends who we love. Like, it is a real master stroke of PR, of bigotry and of discrimination masked as altruism. It's a master stroke.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And it does. That's what it does. It allows them to discriminate on their universities, which we've seen multiple examples of. Right?
Not only that, Elder Bednar and the apostles know, and I'm sure they've been briefed on this. These laws that they're passing are useless for LGBT people. And they're useless because we've seen what happened with transgender students in Utah just a couple months ago, where transgender students can't play sports in the state of Utah, even when we have the Utah Compromise that it's supposed to protect that right. So the church knows that this Utah Compromise and the Arizona bill are useless for LGBT people. Those rights are already at the federal level, and at the end, Mormon legislators are still going to legislate laws that are going to discriminate against LGBT people at the end. But the rights that are protecting, that these laws that he's talking about that are protecting, are the rights of the church to discriminate. And those are the ones that are, right now, we don't know how everything is going to play out. But if these bills keep being passed, then it's written into law. There's not much that can be done after that.
Yeah. Really quick, shout out to Colby Reddish for his super chat donation. Thank you, Colby, and to Mormon Neurodivergence for your super chat. I know, Gerardo, you felt so passionately about this, and rightly so. Jen, you too. Gerardo, RFM, let's get you in on this subject. Anything you want to add, because you are such a sharp mind and you have such good analysis.
Two things. The first is that when Elder Bednar started talking about those familiar with the church may be aware of our 2015 roll. And I went, what?
Yeah. Like, what else did you not mention about 2015?
Yeah, is he actually going to say it? No, of course not. He's going to say the other thing that happened earlier in the year and going to completely omit what?
Tell non-Mormons what he's omitting, just for those who don't know.
Oh, the fact that after the Oberfeld decision came down from the Supreme Court in 2015, which was, I think, around September. It was a couple of months before they decided to sneak into the church handbook their reactionary policy to that, saying that not only are homosexuals who are in a relationship, that now, because it's made legal, we're going to make it clear that if they're in a relationship, they are apostate under the definition, so they need to be excommunicated. And more problematic, to my point of view, is about the kids. And so if you've got children who one of their parents is in a relationship that is homosexual, then those kids can't get baptized. They can't get blessed. If they're a boy, they can't get the priesthood at 12 when everybody else would. And they can't go on a mission, and unless they publicly disavow the offending parent's lifestyle and get special permission from the first presidency. Then they, I guess in one day they get baptized, they get the priesthood, they go to the temple, and then they go on their mission. But the thing that really struck me is that, I'm not sure this is a master stroke. Maybe it is. Maybe it fools some people. But the problem is that the church has spent decades spending untold amounts of sacred tithing dollars and untold amounts of effort and work trying state by state by state to defeat gay marriage. And of course, California is a big, well-known example. But they have people who are members of the church in most legislatures in most states, and they are contact people that they went to give them marching orders, to strategize with, to figure out how to best fight gay marriage. They've been doing this for decades, and now they lose. And now Elder Bednar is portraying the church as the champions of civil liberties for gay people, the LGBTQ community. The way he presents it, they are riding in their full polished armor on their white Chargers. And if it weren't for the LDS church, I mean, who knows what would happen to these poor gay people and in this community? Because the way he presents it, everybody else is against them except for the Mormon church. And it's at this point that he overplays his hand, I think. And I would tell him, you need to back off of that, because you're getting perilously close to bathos at this point, which is taking something that's supposed to be wonderful and artistic and incredible, but now it's appearing ridiculous in the public eyes because you've overplayed your hand. This is the history. No, you're not the champions of civil liberties for anybody, frankly, and certainly not for this community that you fought against for forever. And now you're going to say, oh, we're the best thing that ever happened to them, and we're going to keep working. We're going to keep working on behalf of those gay people because their civil liberties are so important to us. And like Gerardo said, yeah, the unspoken part is we're doing that because we've lost the game, and now we're trying to do a retreat and surrender and get some kind of treaty whereby we get to keep the thing that we've wanted all along. We can't impose our religious beliefs on society anymore. So now we just want to be able to impose our religious beliefs within our own system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Love it, RFM. Such great analysis. Alan LaPratte writes, thanks for highlighting what was blatantly left out of his talk. Gerardo, you get the final word on this. Thanks, RFM.
Wait, let me have a word then before
Jen.
Gerardo, because
Okay,
I'm going to let Gerardo have the last word.
Jen.
Because someone sent this to me the other day. It was posted by Latter Gay Stories about BYU, Idaho recently, and their the bishops have to now, there was
Mhm.
something added to the questions they have to ask the student to be able to go to BYU Idaho. There was an addition to the questions, and it says, does the student live abstinence from homosexual conduct? So it also asks some other things about pornography and abstinence before marriage and things like that. But that is a sentence that was added that didn't used to be there.
Mm,
And that's recent. That's like someone posted that last week.
Mhm.
So that was added. So I don't believe they're making any progress there.
no, definitely not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's all I wanted to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, keep trying, LDS Church. I also just say it was really disturbing to me. Just I alluded to this, but just like it's so hard to work with these people, but we're gonna keep trying.
Yeah.
Like, wasn't Christ about the least of these? Like, shouldn't this be an honor and a privilege? And then of course he's like, and we have a gay person up here on the stand. Like, I guess Equality Utah had someone there. I don't know if Equality Utah has an
Probably.
active faithful Mormon who's like a representative or a liaison. But again, it's like, see, I know a gay person. I have a gay friend. Like, we're good. It's a little bit similar to the NAACP thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have really good opinions about Equality Utah, but
That's another show.
yeah.
All right. All right. Well, that was great analysis. Thanks, Jen, RFM, and Gerardo. Okay, so we're kind of wrapping up his talk. The next part is about our temple efforts and temple growth. We've covered this a bit on MormonStories, but what does he have to say about temples? Here we go.
Now, I again emphasize matters that are to us. We are building temples all over the world. Chile and Colorado, Guam and Guatemala, Nigeria, New Zealand, and the Netherlands. We have come a long way since the Washington, D.C. temple was dedicated in 1974, the 16th temple in the church at that time. Presently, almost 300 temples are in operation, announced, in design, or under construction. President Nelson has announced 100 of those temples in his 4 very busy years as president of the church. These beautiful structures are located in 70 countries. Temples are distinctive from the thousands of our church meeting houses or chapels located around the world. Sunday worship services take place in meeting houses, as well as youth gatherings, service projects, and other community events. All are welcome to join in any and all of these activities. Temples, once they are dedicated, are reserved for church members who are prepared to participate in our most sacred rites and ordinances. As I already mentioned, these ceremonies lift, inspire, ennoble, and change participants as they accept the individual responsibility to follow the teachings and the example of Jesus Christ. Much like the children of Israel with their tabernacle and King Solomon's temple, we are a temple building and a temple loving people. And the spiritual promises we make in our temples today are fundamental to changing people from the inside out.
All right. I have really strong feelings about all that, but I'll let you guys go first. RFM, we'll let you go first this time because sometimes we keep the best for last. And no offense, panel, but just trying to show RFM some love. RFM.
Love it.
Well, if I'm going first, you're definitely saving the best for last. No, temples. I mean, this church is building temples, or at least announcing temples, like nobody's business. I'm glad to see that Elder Bednar remembers on what side his bread is buttered when he starts doing his, what would you call it? Toadying to President Nelson about how President Nelson has now announced 100 temples, 100 of those 300 temples in his very busy 4 years as president. And it has been theorized that the church is building temples like hell isn't having any, not because there's enough members to justify it, but as an outward sign of an inward lack of grace as an attempt to show that the church is stronger and more robust than it actually is, as represented by membership growth. If that is true, then Elder Bednar has just used it exactly for that purpose, because he's talking about the number of temples in order to try and demonstrate to the audience how robust the growth of the church is. And that was a thing that I thought of when he was saying this.
Beautiful. Thanks, RFM. Loved it. Gerardo, anything you want to add?
No, I think we've covered it a lot,
Okay.
right? Like temple building and how the church could be using a lot of that money for other causes.
Yeah. So someone wrote that, like, why not feed the hungry?
Right.
Why not clothe the naked?
Right.
There's so many better uses for the church's massive treasure trove of wealth than like these ordinances and ordinances for dead people that really aren't going to benefit from them, etc. I've got some strong feelings, but Jen, I want you to go before I go. Anything else you want to add?
No, I just kind of believe the same thing as RFM, that they're just trying, it's like they're trying to make it look like the church is growing and not shrinking. And I think that's their outward way of appearing like it is. But eventually I think it will probably catch up with them. But yeah, I'll let you. Finish
No.
up.
I mean, if you watch Going Clear, the Scientology documentary, one of the ways it ends is that Scientology is so fraught and so on the ropes that they're massively declining in membership. But they've invested so much money and they've been so successful financially that they're growing their revenue, their annual revenue and wealth, as their membership's shrinking, which is leaving them with a bunch of empty buildings. And the Mormon Church is in the exact same state. They're hemorrhaging members, but because they've got hundreds of billions of dollars of wealth, they're becoming fantastically rich, but they're selling off. You can't go on Ex-Mormon Reddit any week without seeing buildings at the churches. They're shutting down wards, they're closing stakes, they're closing missions, they're collapsing units, and they're selling buildings, right? So how can it be that they're massively selling off buildings, chapels, but they're tripling the number of temples being built? That math doesn't work, right? But then I thought about it, and by the way, there's a MormonStories episode that we should link to in the show notes, where a member of a Mormon Stake High Council along the Wasatch Front shares with me leaked information from inside the temple department at church headquarters. And what the leak was that a high-level member of the church temple department was willing to share with me the fact that they're all wondering what Russell M. Nelson is doing, because in the past, when they built temples, it was like, okay, how many active members in the country or in the area,
holders,
how many priesthood holders, how much tithing. Okay, now the country has earned a temple, right? And that's why they built temples at kind of a moderate pace. But for some reason, Elder Nelson just severed that. There's no logic now for why they build a temple. And he's just announced 100 temples in 4 years. Temples in areas like, there was a comment in maybe one of you can show it.
New Zealand.
Yeah, like there's a commenter that said, yay, there's like 4,000 members in the Netherlands and now they're going to build a temple here. Like they're building temples in New Zealand and Rome, and where there are like a massive decline in membership, where like the church is about to disappear in some of these European countries.
Yeah.
And yet they're going to build a temple there. And it makes no sense, right? Even to the church temple department, it makes no sense, let alone the fact that they're announcing a gazillion temples, but haven't even started building them yet. So Jen, I think you're right. At some point it's going to catch up to them. But the point that I wanted to make is I'm scratching my head thinking, why would this be Russell M. Nelson's big initiative? And then it occurred to me, you guys want to hear why?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Threefold mission of the church, right? Perfect the saints, right? Perfect the saints, proclaim the gospel, and redeem the dead. Well, where are you going to put your money, right? Proclaiming the gospel Like, you could invest all day long in the church missionary program, and what are we finding? The church is the church is declining. That dog is not hunting anywhere but in impoverished countries with a lack of education. So yeah, they're going to invest in Africa, and that's where all the mission growth is happening. That's where all the ward and state growth is happening, is in Africa. But that's because everywhere else in the world, the church is hemorrhaging and shrinking, even in Latin America. Plus, fewer and fewer Mormons are choosing to serve missions. And so you've got like 2/3 of our missionary force now are female, and like 2/3 of young Mormon men along the Wasatch Front are choosing not to serve missions. So that's not a great place to put your money when you know the missionary program is literally bankrupt, right? So then you've got perfecting the saints. But what do we know is true about the Mormon church? That the members are leaving in droves. The church is hemorrhaging its active membership. Do you want to invest in that? How are you going to turn that around? Well, what can you do with all your money? You can build a gazillion opulent buildings that are like flexes to the world. Look, we're super rich and we're super powerful and we're super influential, and we're going to build an opulent, conspicuous, luxurious architectural structure in every major world city, because that's all we can do with our money that actually will have anything to show for it. Now, that's probably a pretty cynical view, but like, how else do we explain 100 temples being announced in the past 4 years with a declining membership across the world? Those temples aren't going to be full of people performing temple ordinances. Yeah. They're going to be empty for the majority of the time that they're there, staffed by old people from the United States. They're just going to sit there and keep the lights on when there's no members actually performing temple ordinances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's my rant.
And when they could do so much more good with the money.
Yeah.
I just remember that's one of the things for my first temple experience is going into the celestial room and looking up at the chandelier and being like, I wonder how many like people they could have fed with what that chandelier cost. Like, there's just, there's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, that's my rant. RFM, do you think I'm too harsh in my rant?
No, I don't think so in this case, Dr. DeLynn. However, I do think that you raise a very good point, which is when it comes to people joining the church, well, money's not going to override their ability to choose whether they want to join the church. And when it comes to people leaving the church, money's not going to be able to override their decision to leave the church. And the good thing about buildings like temples is they don't have any free agency.
They can't leave.
Temples can't choose whether they're in the church. They can't leave the church. Right. That's a great point. All right. Well, and it's convenient because the next part of his talk is about the church growth. And it by all accounts, the church, but according to Elder Bednar, the church is doing great. So here's Elder Bednar on the church's awesome, massive growth.
Now let's consider President Hinckley's appearance at this lectern back in 2000 and his pragmatic introduction of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to members of the media. In that year, church membership was approaching 11 million. Today, church membership is almost 17 million worldwide. We have more than 31,000 congregations. More of our members live outside of the United States than within the United States. Church members speak over 160 languages. And while we are growing in the US, our greatest expansion presently is occurring in Africa.
All right. So, yeah, 17 million members, 31,000 congregations, more outside the US. We're not just an American church, more outside the US than inside the US. And we're expanding in Africa, like churches going bonkers, gangbusters, Gerardo.
Yeah. So when he kept bringing up that number, 31,000 congregations, and then when he put it right next to the 17 million members, I was like, there's no way this math adds up. Like, so I just thought, okay, let's put the best case scenario. Like, let's be super optimistic and say that there's 250 members, just like a random number, 250 members in each congregation that are active and semi-active attending. 250 per congregation in the world. If you multiply that by the 31,000 congregations that the church that Elder Bednar is saying they have, that's only 7,750,000 members. So where are the other 9 million that he's claiming they have?
Yeah. So what? Yeah.
And not all congregations have 200.
Right. That's like a super optimistic number.
Optimistic number.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And we just know that, like, we know that the church, it probably 30% activity rate across the world. 2/3 of all the people ever baptized Mormon no longer attend or even no longer identify as Mormon. At the most is 3 to 4 million. So the fact that he doesn't just say, hey, we're really struggling and the church is struggling and we're shrinking and we're scared and we don't know what to do. He's just going to go on this sort of diatribe about all the congregations and the statistical numbers. But this is a case where he's deceiving people, knowingly deceiving people. They should never, ever say that 17 million number.
So someone just did the math. Like, if we take the 17 million members and the 31,000 congregations, that would be 500 to 600 members per congregation.
Yeah, no way. RFM, what do you want to say about the church going gangbusters in its growth?
Oh, I think it's okay for them to say 17 million. I think it's okay for them to say 31,000 units. They just shouldn't say them both in the same sentence. That's the problem, because it totally gives away everything. And I do agree that Gerardo was being more than generous with 250 members in each ward. I thought it was like 200 members for a fully functioning ward, and the wards don't have 200 in them by and large. And a lot of those units are not wards, they're also branches, which is going to reduce that number. So yeah, this is the best case scenario that Gerardo's come up with for the church. I will note, however, because this is going to happen later, Elder Bednar is a statistician by training. And when it comes to counting beans that he feels are helpful to the church, he has all the numbers down pat. But later on, when you get to the Q&A, there's going to be pushback on a recent Salt Lake Tribune article about a more realistic view of the membership numbers of the LDS church throughout the United States. And as soon as he gets pushed back on that, he's going to drop the statistician hat. He's actually going to say, okay, well, I'm a statistician, I'm an academic, but I'm going to answer that one as an apostle, not as a statistician. And as an apostle, hell if I know. I don't know what the numbers are. That's really his answer.
We have a donation and a comment. Jacob Berg, thank you for the super chat, Jacob Berg. He writes, active church members shrinking here in Switzerland. Thanks for keeping us informed. And it's not just in Switzerland, Jacob. In I was just in the UK. The church is hemorrhaging in Scotland. It's hemorrhaging in England. It's hemorrhaging in Germany, Netherlands, France, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Japan, Hong Kong, everywhere except for Africa. And we're going to talk about this later, but what is it about Africa? The church preys on people in poverty who are uneducated, and that's where the church is going to grow. And everybody else who's got a decent economy with decent levels of education, they don't want the church.
They're playing the same strategy that they did with Latin America before the internet age. So in Latin America, not a lot of information before internet.
That's what I keep thinking is
now,
that they don't have internet.
And now the Latin America, has like access to information. All of a sudden, church's growth is declining and active membership declining.
So it's the church is hemorrhaging. The world doesn't really know that, and the church doesn't acknowledge it, but it's a fact, and it's a huge problem. And we're going to talk more about this in the Q&A. But
Yeah.
All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the church's massive humanitarian aid. They really want to emphasize this. So let's.
Oh my gosh, you're going to play this whole thing, John, because this is where I got about the only nap I've gotten in 24 hours was when I was listening to this for the first time this morning in preparation for this show.
Do you think it's too long? Do you think it's too long?
I don't. Well, yes, I do. I know it can't be longer than the talk itself, but it seems to be hours and hours. So just let me know. I'll just plump up my pillow here, and you let me know when it's over, okay?
All right, RFM.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Oh,
sorry, 1 second. Okay, here we go. Oh, why isn't it playing?
Can you make it full screen? Oh, I can do it. There we go.
As these examples demonstrate, change also is necessary from the outside in. Generous donations from our church members, as well as friends of the faith, allow us to support the initiatives I just described and many, many others. 20 years ago, President Hinckley mentioned that the church completed 829 humanitarian projects in 101 countries. Last year, that number was 909 projects in 188 countries. And this was just one portion of a comprehensive $906 million effort to care for those in need. You have on your tables the latest annual humanitarian report from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I briefly want to provide just two examples of initiatives our church supports. First, around the world, we assist in digging wells and providing clean water, a common and critical need in poorer parts of the world. In many places in Africa, for instance, women devote a considerable amount of time every day procuring and hauling water for home use. In some locations, a woman may need to walk for many hours to and from a well. My wife Susan and I have witnessed the indescribable delight of small children splashing in and drinking clean water from a new well. What may seem commonplace to so many of us is the blessing of a lifetime for so many others, and makes it possible for these women to pursue education. And second, we are assisting with the refugees and those displaced by the conflict in Ukraine, as well as in 27 other neighboring European countries. The church is supporting multiple organizations, including UN agencies, as well as Kyiv Red Cross, in providing items such as shelter, bedding, food, and hygiene and baby supplies. In 2020 and 2021, in response to supply issues experienced during the pandemic, 2,800 truckloads of commodities from the church's storehouse system were delivered to nearly 400 food banks, homeless shelters, and other charitable organizations across the U.S. This equated to more than 82 million meals for those in need. Outside of North America, the church works with local grocery chains to help provide food to members in need. As an organization, our humanitarian efforts are guided by our commitment to live God's second great commandment, to love our neighbors. We partner with global and other faith-based organizations as they work within an established set of humanitarian principles. This work extends far beyond our church members, and our volunteers continue to help with cleanup and recovery from disasters for many weeks and even months after the initial event. We remain in place long after media coverage wanes and global volunteers move on to the next urgent emergency. In 2021, the church supported 135 mobility projects, such as wheelchairs, in 57 countries and territories, hosted 3,000 blood drives resulting in 100,000 units donated, and assisted 7 major immunization campaigns, including significant financial donations to help UNICEF take COVID-19 immunizations to dozens of countries. UNICEF works in some of the world's most challenging places to reach the world's.
I'm going to go ahead and just do an executive decision and kind of pause. The church just lists a gazillion humanitarian efforts like COVID, the Ukraine, poverty, water.
Helping members with fast offerings, with the he mentions even that.
I mean, so to try and, like, in the spirit of RFM, trying to kind of be fair and balanced, right? Like, why shouldn't our reaction be, wow, this is our reaction like, wow, the church is doing a lot of good? Shouldn't we just sort of give credit where credit is due and saying the church is delivering clean water to people who need it? They're helping Ukrainian refugees. They're helping with the pandemic and a gazillion other humanitarian efforts. Who wants to go first? Gerardo, you know.
I love it. I think that's great. But I think critics have a lot to be thanked for like the churches putting all this money into this. And is it okay if we show just the slides really quick and then we comment just to give the context?
Yeah. So you developed some slides.
Yeah, and this is based on what he just said. But
Okay.
so I just put it into years just so people can see it.
Okay.
Visually. So he mentioned he mentioned that President Hinckley at the National Press Conference, President Hinckley announced 829 projects and in 101 countries. And so I went and looked for President Hinckley's talk, and he talks about $55.2 million of total donation in from the previous year, and this was in 2000. Then, if you go to the next one, I remember this article from the Desert News, where Elder Oaks. This is again another press conference, and Elder Oaks says that the church spends on welfare and humanitarian efforts an average of $40 million per year. And he says that's $1.2 billion on welfare and humanitarian efforts over the past 30 years. So if you do 40 million and then multiply it by 30 years, you get $1.2 billion. And that's what Elder Oaks says. That's what the church has been spending. And that confirms what President Hinckley said, the 50 million in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty much confirmed, the same amount. So it seems like the church is spending anywhere from 50 to 40 $1 million every year on humanitarian effort.
Mm-hmm.
Then if you go to the next slide, then in 2020, all of a sudden we have the 100 billion fund leaked.
The Ensign Peak.
Yeah, the Ensign Peak advisor investment.
It's actually like 120 billion.
Right.
With everything, yeah.
So all of a sudden this is known and everyone is like, that's crazy. The church is only donating $40 million when they have 100 billion, in their investment fund, in just one investment fund. What is going on? And then if you go to the next one, then all of a sudden Elder Bednar 2 years later announces that the previous year the humanitarian efforts are 22 times more than it had been in previous years. So 906 million. And if you go to the next slide, that just shows like that's a real representation of what it looks like. So we have 50 to 40 million dollars every year from 2000 to 2016. We don't know 2017, 18, 19, 20, and then we have 2021 $900 million donated.
That is a funny slide.
And I just Google, I was wondering, how does this compare to other
really
philanthropists?
Quick. So is your point is your point that the church is lying?
No, I'm not saying it's lying.
Or do you think that the church just realized it had a PR problem and just massively increased? Or did they jimmy the numbers and start counting a lot of other things? Like, what's your summarize your point there, Gerardo?
I think Elder Oaks made it really clear that was all the donations the church was doing in aggregate, 40 million. So I don't think the numbers, I think RFM will have some insights on the numbers, but I think what's happening is because the media starts hammering the church, you have $100 billion and you're only donating 40 million in humanitarian aid per year. All of a sudden, then they have to say, okay, let's donate 1% of that $100 billion instead of 0.00, something percent.
And I guess it's disappointing that the church wouldn't. It's basically the church got caught with its hand in the cookie jar.
Exactly.
And it wasn't altruistic, Christ inspired motives of helping the poor. It's like the church got caught with its hand in the cookie jar of getting fabulously wealthy off of its membership. And so it said, okay, I guess we'll do some humanitarian efforts now.
Yeah. Otherwise, you would see like an increase, right? But we have from 2000 to 2016, and even 30 years before that, we have Elder Oaks saying that that's how much the church is spending in humanitarian aid.
Yeah.
Do they ever break that down? Like the humanitarian side?
They broke it up a little bit. They don't give you the exact numbers.
Not to the exact. I'm just wondering what's included in that.
But RFM has some insights in that. But.
Okay. So you're going to make the point about like other philanthropists.
Yeah, just really quick. I just was wondering, okay, what are the biggest philanthropists in the world? How much are they worth? I have 3 examples. Bill Gates and Melinda Gates are worth $125 billion, and they donated $15 billion last year in 2021.
That's in 1 year?
In 1 year. That's the 2021 year. Okay. Yeah, 1 year.
All right.
And then the next one is Michael Bloomberg. He's worth $82 billion, and he donated $1.7 billion. And then
in a year.
In a year, 2021. Okay. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah,
that's from the AP.
Yeah.
And then Mark Zuckerberg, $71.5 billion. That's his worth. And then he donated $1.05 billion.
Okay. And then the church donated how much in 2021?
Less than $1 billion.
So basically like individual billionaires are out.
Who are worth less than what the church is worth, are donating more than what the church donated.
And the church is supposed to be a Christ-centered organization, a charity, a nonprofit.
For charity. And for whatever that's worth, it's great. 900 compared to 40 million that they were donating before.
Better.
Yeah,
better
for sure.
But is it what Jesus would do?
Yeah. All right, Gerardo, so you have a couple more slides.
Just that, this is from the Salt Lake Tribune, and this is an article where they talk how the LDS Church made $22 billion during the pandemic, just on one of the funds that they made public after the leak.
Plus, the church filed for like PPP loans and stuff, so they got $1 gazillion from the federal government.
Yeah,
in PPP.
Oh, loans. I have the last one.
Oh, okay.
That's only for federal aid for BYU schools for their
2018.
In 2018,
261 million.
They received $261 million from the federal government to support BYU schools. That's 1/4 of the amount of money that they donated last year to charity.
Right. Yeah. All right. Yeah. And then there's just the question of the PPP loans and how much did the church bring in?
Yeah.
So your basic point is the church is number one, it was paying way too little for way too long. Then all of a sudden it got caught with its hand in the cookie jar. Then it all of a sudden increased its expenditures, but even then it's far too low relative to other wealthy people, let alone organizations.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. RFM, do you want to add anything to what Gerardo said?
Just a couple of things, since I heard my name mentioned. I think that one of the things is that Gerardo's point isn't that the church or that Elder Bednar is lying. That's more my point. Because I don't believe that for a second. I don't believe for a second that they suddenly increased their contributions 22-fold over the last 3 decades or whatever it was. So, but this is what happens. These are statistics. Everybody knows the old expression, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. And statistics can be made to say whatever it is you want them to say, especially when you're not giving the details behind them.
Oh, sense point. Yeah.
I have heard, though I cannot confirm, that the LDS Church, of course, encourages its members to go out to all of these disasters with their yellow helping hands advertising T-shirts. And they then report the number of days and hours they worked. And then they have bean counters in Salt Lake who add up the hours, assign some kind of a value to the hours, which may or may not be minimum wage, or maybe more than that. and then they do the calculations, add up all the money that doesn't even exist, right? That these people would have been paid if they had been paid for the volunteer work they're doing at these disaster sites, and that those get incorporated as well into donations that the church claims that it makes. Has anybody else ever heard that?
Yeah.
That just makes sense to me that those numbers are inflated, that they basically got some Bain or McKinsey consultant to say, wait a minute, let's look at how we count our annual charitable contributions. Let's include service hours and let's do some massive bloated calculation. But to Jen's point, if you don't show what's spent, how it's spent, where it's spent, it's literally, it could be just made up out of thin air.
Yeah, this was a great thing that that Gerardo did with this graph and everything, because if you take it as being honest and correct, why the huge jump, which is his point, and if you don't take it as being honest and correct, why the huge jump anyway, right? I mean, it beggars belief to think that something that's been so static for 30 years suddenly jumps up like that, like a sore thumb. And I would say that the main thing I want to take away from this, and I want the audience to remember, is that David Bednar is the master of statistics. He is the master of the numbers. He is the number cruncher, bean counter par excellence. And he's demonstrated it with all these different things. And you haven't even played them all because, you know, it was going to kill us to listen to them all. In fact, that was a good strategy. Put your audience to sleep.
Sorry.
Before you get to the Q&A. I think that was brilliant. But please remember that. I almost wish that we could go right now to that Q&A where he gets the pushback. I'm not saying you need to, but where he gets the question about the statistics and the membership, and it appears to be going down, and you're saying it's going up, but what about this and all these statistics? And then all of a sudden, he doesn't know statistics from anything. You know, he doesn't know the numbers. Nobody told him about the numbers. And he specifically says, well, I'm not going to answer that as a statistician because that would crucify me. Instead, I'm going to answer it as an apostle. And as an apostle of the Lord Jesus Christ, I'm going to tell you, I got no idea what the numbers are.
Yeah.
I'm just an apostle.
Yeah. No, and we are really excited to play the Q&A. Viewers and listeners, if you think this has been cool, and we've got 800 sustained viewers right now, so people are loving this episode, it's way better, the Q&A. But I just felt like it was important to take our time to analyze the church's PR spin.
Yeah.
Separate. That's the PR spin is the premeditated, impression the church wants to give people. That's different from how he reacts to kind of questions that he may or may not have been given beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have enjoyed what we've done so far and what we're going to do just for the remaining time of this part one, please come back for part two, because the Q&A is explosive. In RFM, we're really hoping we're going to be able to get you back for part two.
Well, just be sure and let me know less than 4 hours before you go live, okay?
It's all
otherwise
Gerardo's
I'd be
fault.
Disappointed.
It's 100% Gerardo's fault. No, it's hard. We have Gerardo to thank, because we wouldn't have done this episode without Gerardo. So
yeah, he's done a lot of work. He's excellent. And I think, John, Gerardo deserves a raise.
Okay. I think I just gave him one. Is that true, Gerardo?
Yeah.
Bravo.
He just got one.
Good job.
All right. And by the way, support Radio Free Mormon podcast. Donate to Radio Free Mormon. Donate to Bill Reel. Donate to Mormonism Live. Because RFM, if anyone deserves a raise, it's you, brother.
Yes.
Well, thank you. I think that all the live chats that have been racked up during the show were earmarked to Radio Free Mormon, now that you mention it.
All right. We'll make sure. We'll cut you a check. We tried. Hey, we cut you a decent check when you came to Salt Lake, didn't we, RFM?
Yes, you did, and I appreciate it. I'm kidding, and I kid because I love.
I'm like the Mormon Church. I want credit for the good that I do.
Yes, well, not really, because the LDS Church wants credit for the good it does with other people's money.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, let's go to now. Now Bednar's going to talk about kind of the remaining missions of the church, and the first one he's going to talk about is the missionary program. So let's hear how awesome the church's missionary program
You said this is the last one we're going to play?
No, there's a couple more slides.
Okay.
There's like 3 or 4 more slides.
Okay.
and then we'll stop for today. Maybe we'll bring on a couple people who've been waiting patiently. If any of you want to join and provide commentary, now would be the point for you to click on the link and join. And for those who have been really patient, we promise to bring you on as some closing thoughts for this part one. But let's quickly just talk about hear what Bednar has to say about the church's missionary program. Okay, all right, so here we go.
Our church presently has more than 91,000 missionaries serving around the world, primarily young men and women. Each is a volunteer, funding the experience individually or with help from family or other members of the church. Our missionaries help to fulfill the scriptural mandate to go ye therefore and teach all nations. Our missionaries teach the gospel of Jesus Christ and help others on their spiritual journey to become more like the Savior. Every missionary learns the life-changing lesson that he or she is part of something greater and more important than self. These women and men are one of the most recognizable features of our church as they live among and bless people in communities around the world. We always have been and always will be a missionary-oriented church.
All right, so my first question is is that what missionaries do? Mormon missionaries help people become like Jesus and bless people around the world. Like, is that, how do you guys feel about his characterization of the Mormon missionary program? Any thoughts, Jen?
I think the young people going into serving a mission go in with that pure thought. I think they go in with a heart of service and to help people better their life. I think the young people really do think that way. I think they do have a pure heart in it.
Mm-hmm. Is there a but there?
The church, on the other hand, I think a lot, what I hear from people who have been through their faith transition and look back at their mission, there's a sadness in it for them because they know that a lot of those people that they converted were actually better off and happier in the life that they had before they were converted to the LDS faith. And so there's a certain sadness that they have to kind of work through in their faith transition. And so there's that part to think about. That
Beautiful.
they weren't, you know, they were happier before.
Yeah.
And it's hard to think about that.
You're saying they're going to people to tell them their way of life is wrong and inferior.
Yeah.
And that they need to join the true church, which will give them the most happiness.
Which then ostracizes them from their families, which then takes them away, which then, you know, it's just, I don't know. It reminds me of Mark Oslin's interview with Margie recently. Just that his family was amazing and beautiful, and his parents were doing awesome, and like
as non-Mormons,
yeah. You know, they had this beautiful, happy relationship with him, and it was so close. And then when he was baptized, and then, you know, these things were
all of a sudden he's estranged from his mom.
He's estranged. His athletic career is taken away. You know, there's just a lot of things that went into that, and it's just not true. It's just not true.
And he's racked with shame and guilt that he, you know, and
it comes with a lot. There's just a lot. It's just not that simple.
Yeah.
And it's not true.
Yeah.
That
Gerardo, what were your
always?
Gerardo,
I should say.
Yeah. Thank you, Jen. That's beautiful. Gerardo, what were your reactions?
I think I had good and bad experiences on my mission. But something I would say it was that it came with a lot of shame with not being perfectly obedient. So there's a lot of emphasis on missions of being perfectly obedient. That if you're not doing the tiniest thing right, God is not going to bless you to find the right people to teach. and they're gonna lose their part in heaven. A lot of focus on numbers, and this I've heard from so many people too. It's not really the focus to really bring people close to Jesus. It's getting them through the lessons quickly, as fast as possible, making sure they show up to church 2, 3, 4 times so they can meet the requirements to get baptized, and then move on. Move on to the next family. On my mission, we were discouraged to do service projects that were not gonna take us, that we're not gonna really bring or help us find new people to teach.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you're not really teaching people about Jesus. You're teaching them about Joseph Smith, about some passages of the Book of Mormon, and teaching them tithing and law of chastity, and pretty much so they are ready to answer the questions for their baptism.
And Mormon priesthood authority and prophet worship, basically.
Right.
Hero
Right.
worship.
I know my sister didn't even teach the 10 Commandments because they were, even though it's part of the Preach My Gospel, they were told by their mission president, like, you don't have to teach that. Just teach whatever is necessary for the baptismal interview.
Faith, repentance, baptism.
Yeah.
Yeah. RFM, what do you want to add to his comments about the missionary program?
You notice he says over 91,000.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
I mean, he's really trying hard to make Elder Holland's prediction come true.
What's wrong with 91,000?
Well, only that. He's talking about it in terms of they're being recognizable. They're primarily young people. They're basically the proselytizing missionaries, like I was, like you were, like most of us were. And then there's 31,000 apparently service missionaries that they want to lump in with the proselytizing missionaries in order to pump it up to over 91,000. But these service missionaries, by and large, and I'm not an expert on everything a service missionary does. I used to have an idea that they'd go out and perform service for people, and be helpful. But I think that usually they're just sort of free labor for the LDS church.
Yeah.
To run their different visitor centers or landmarks, or
like unpaid temp labor, like
financials and missions.
My stepmom that my dad's married to, when she served a mission as a retired person, she was like an administrative assistant to a general authority. So she was basically answering phones and like a secretary. I think she got kind of sick of it. Like, this is why I feel like I'm in an office job. Right. Yeah.
So he's going to lump all those people that the church conscripts into free labor for the church under the auspices of, oh, this is a church mission for you. He's going to pump that into the 60 some odd thousand, maybe 67,000 missionaries that they count, who are actually what normally we think of as missionaries, to pump it up to 91,000. And all I'm saying is, yes, you can justify that using the definitions that the church itself has put upon these temporary hirings. And they're not even hiring. I mean, these people have to pay for it, right?
Yeah.
They've got to pay for the privilege of working for the church.
Yeah.
Which is great as far as the church goes. But this is just an example of how he could justifiably defend his use of that inflated number, what I see as an inflated number.
Mm-hmm.
But he's doing it, he's giving a overly optimistic representation of how well the church is doing and how great the church is doing, when the reality is substantially less than what he's representing. And he does this throughout. This is just another example of it.
Yeah. And we already know now that like 2/3 of active Mormon youth that are active by the age of 16, 2/3 are choosing not to serve missions. Right. Yeah. And the overall number of missionaries has been declining.
A lot of them are coming back early.
Why? Yeah. A full third of the Mormon missionaries are coming home early, losing their faith, not to mention the unsafe conditions, the poor mental health services. There's a lot of problems with the missionary program, and he's kind of just like saying it's all peachy keen. Thanks, RFM. That's brilliant. And I'll just say, yeah, these are paid salesmen, right? And the church will admit that, sorry, there's salesmen who pay to be salesmen. Imagine if Microsoft or IBM said, yeah, you can help us sell software if you pay, $20,000 a year, we'll let you sell our software for us. Like, so yeah, it's a really interesting way to frame it. And I think most people will acknowledge that the Mormon Church Missionary Program, first and foremost, is to seal these Mormon youth to the church. It's to basically give them what I think everyone will agree is the most cultish part of Mormonism is serving a Mormon mission.
Yep.
You're separated from your family. You're highly controlled. You can't watch TV. You can't read the newspaper. You can't date. You're working for the church from 7:30 a.m. till 10:30 at night. Super strict rules, and it's all to sort of really seal your commitment to the church.
You have a partner that is checking,
Can't
that
be
you're
alone.
following the rules.
You literally can only be alone when you're in the bathroom.
Yeah.
For 2 years.
Yeah.
And it's to convert the Mormon members as youth to the church, so that then they're lifelong committed to the church.
Yep.
Yeah. And yeah. So that's the missionary program. Let's do education really quick. And I wonder if we want to skip this part. I don't know. But basically, he does this big, long diatribe about how early converts to the church were poor and uneducated, that there's this interesting statistic. I'm not going to play this clip because it's so long, but he basically makes the statistic that within Mormonism, the more educated you are, the more devoted you are to the church. And that may not be the case in other religious traditions. He talks about all the different BYUs, BYU Provo, BYU Idaho, BYU Hawaii, Ensign College. He talks about the BYU Pathway program, where they're offering free or discounted education to people all over the world, especially in developing countries. He talks about people in the Philippines and Nigeria and Mexico using the BYU Pathway program to get their education for super cheap. And then he talks about how the church's education can lift people spiritually and temporally. And I'm not going to play the clip because it's too long. Gerardo, do you have any strong feelings about that sort of part of the program?
Yeah. Maybe about Pathway. So I know it's not free. People have to pay money to do it. The actual Pathway program, it's like a religion course that you have to pay to the church to get this like 1 year, 3-semester religion course. So then you can be admitted into BYU Idaho online, right? And then you used to have only like 2 or 3 options for majors, but most people stop after Pathway. And I know because my mom did Pathway and she was super involved with it in Mexico, and she was, I think, the first member in Mexico to graduate with an actual bachelor's degree in Mexico, because most people will just stop after Pathway. And my sense is that the church just wants to have people go through Pathway, give them maybe like a certificate, because then they're like being more involved with church. I mean, the whole 3 semesters you're reading conference talks and reading scriptures and writing papers about it. And anyway, so this whole Pathway initiative, I have kind of like conflicting feelings about it.
Okay. Jen?
Yeah, I took it for a semester.
And?
Pathways. Yeah, it's just like Gerardo said. It's all doctrinal kind of
It's
lessons.
religious indoctrination.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're paying for it.
And yeah. And then after
you're paying for religious indoctrination.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, there were certificates or there was a discount from BYU Idaho online that you receive if you finish Pathways.
So it's like an online seminar as a gateway funnel program into
BYU Idaho. Yeah.
Yeah, but most people won't make it into BYU Idaho, or if
Right.
they make it, they'll take a couple semesters.
I didn't,
See?
because I still had kids, and like
Yeah.
it just was still not working
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
Even though I tried, it still wasn't working for me.
And
But
it's almost like Pathway was designed to make it so unrealistic on how really BYU Idaho classes are going to be. And because I know that so many people, okay, they started their first semester at BYU Idaho online thinking that it was going to be like Pathway. And they're like, oh, this is actual college online. I can't do. I mean, I think my mom took like 6 years doing her major, 6 or 7 years doing her major because, you know, I mean, the expectations are unrealistic when people enter into Pathway about how time consuming is going to be.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
RFM, what do you want to say about his, you know, there's this idea that the more educated you get, the more devoted you are to the church. You're an attorney. But what were your reactions to his comments about education? RFM?
First off, who can argue with the idea that education is a good thing?
Right.
It's hard to argue with that. But on the other hand, it sounds like from what I'm hearing about the Pathways program is that, as with everything else, education is used as a missionary tool.
Mm-hmm.
And I suddenly flashed back to my time in Japan when we would have English classes for the Japanese youth to come in and learn English. I don't know if you had anything like that on your mission, John. Maybe you're too busy with the baseball games and everything. But no, and we all know what we're doing as missionaries. We're trying to give the youth of Japan something that they want, which is to learn English. But the point of it is not to teach them English. The point of it is to teach them Mormonism and baptize them. So it sounds like even though education as a principle is good, it seems to be being used, at least to some extent. I don't want to say completely in the LDS church, but to some extent for indoctrination and hopefully conversion. The other thing I was going to say about the question that you asked me, John, was about the more educated you are, the more faithful you are to the church. I think this came from some kind of a survey that was done a number of years ago, and they're comparing educational degrees with church observance and finding Mormons pretty high on both of those. So suggesting a correlation between the two.
Yeah.
And that certainly may be true. But what I think would be more relevant is to ask the question, if the more educated you are about church history means that you're more faithful, because I think that survey is going to go the other way.
Yeah.
Thank you, RFM. That's brilliant. And I'm just going to say, like, when they plug BYU, Provo, you know, he starts out talking about the value of education, and then you know, that education is important, and then he plugs BYU's. Is BYU really about getting a great education? Like, I think BYU.
Elder Holland told us that it's not, right?
What did he say?
His talk with about the muskets, he's like, we're willing to lose accreditation. We're willing to lose everything.
Yeah.
We're pretty much willing to close the university because our mission is, you know, to have faithful members and commit to our teachings, our doctrines, and not sway from them.
Yeah. And my perception is that BYU's great at churning out lawyers, doctors, dentists, orthodontists, computer scientists, businessmen, right? Accountants, and then women who get teaching degrees that then don't use them because they get married and have lots of babies. Like, and so, but if you think about English, you know, English literature, you know, social sciences, psychologists, sociologists, historians. I don't even think BYU offers a graduate degree in history anymore. Like, it's basically gutted any graduate program that would lead anyone to have any meaningful questions or to learn about the church's true history or to question its social justice positions. It's just like gutted all of that. And then it beefs up any degree that's going to make someone become super wealthy so that they pay a crap ton of tithing to the church. Now, that may seem really cynical, but that's my observation. The BYU is about becoming wealthy or getting married young, because the church knows that if you marry a Mormon young and have babies really quickly, you're more likely to stay in the church and pay tithing and stay committed. If you go to a non-BYU university, don't get married quick, don't marry a Mormon, and don't have babies quickly, they lose you.
Yeah. And critical think.
Why does the church doesn't have like universities in other countries? You know, why is it only in very highly Mormon populated? Because like I my understanding is Seventh-day Adventists have universities all over the world.
Yeah.
But they say they will because of pathways.
Yeah,
that's another way for them to say it's global.
Yeah.
Like globally.
Yeah. I don't know. Why do you ask that, Gerardo?
Well, it just makes me wonder. Like, I mean, I think it reinforces the point that the real purpose of these universities are to, in highly concentrated Mormon populations, to keep the most people they can keep inside the church.
Yeah, and to keep them from learning things that's gonna and let's just face it, a big part of BYU is religious indoctrination.
Yeah,
you have to take like almost a year of non-transferable religious courses.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a huge indoctrination component that you pay for.
Yeah.
Yeah. You pay for the church to indoctrinate you more and to teach you that evolution's evil and that the earth is 7,000 years old, etc. That's not true. But anyway, him talking about education is maybe a little bit triggering for me.
Yeah. Just think if the church were building colleges at the rate they're building temples.
Oh my gosh. Wouldn't that be amazing? Low-cost colleges that gave real secular high quality educations.
That would be beautiful.
That could change the world.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
If the world was taught to critically think, like basic logical fallacies and critical thinking skills, what if Pathways was a logical fallacies critical thinking curriculum?
Yeah.
What would that be?
That wouldn't be good for them.
Well, that would be like the Wicked Witch of the West teaching people how to throw buckets of water.
Right. Yeah. I don't think that would work out well for them.
Touche, RFM. That was brilliant. that deserves applause. Let's give RFM applause. That was brilliant. That was good, RFM. Okay. All right. So that's education. We're rounding the bend here. Now it's genealogy.
Can I just say I love that freeze frame that you keep coming back to of Elder Bednar? That's my favorite. Can you put it up there on the screen for a second? Because this is my favorite part where he does his lizard on a hot rock impression.
Oh, gosh.
He's got that down.
Lizard on a hot rock.
You can almost see him flicking his tongue out.
I love it. I'm going to make an executive decision, and we're going to skip this part about genealogy. Just suffice it to say that he talks about genealogy and how awesome we are with genealogy in church history without ever mentioning baptisms for the dead, endowments for the dead, marriage for the dead, and all the main reasons why the church actually does genealogy. He just totally neglects to mention it. And so, yeah, that's all I'm going to say there. And then he has a summary about why we do this. I'm going to go ahead and play this now. This is Elder Bednar summarizing his talk and talking about basically why the church exists. So let's hear that part.
Today, I've tried to describe a few of the things we cherish and strive to do as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I want to address one additional question that you may have. Why do the members of your church do all these things? Faith in the Lord Jesus Christ is far more than passive belief or assent. Faith in the Savior is a principle of action and of power. Faith is evident in our priorities and in how we live. As we learn and live according to the teachings of Jesus, we are blessed with capacity, power, and strength beyond our own. Our hearts are changed. We change from the inside out, and we become new creatures in Christ. To be clear, we do not believe our works save us. Far from it. Only the grace of Jesus Christ can enable us to overcome the many negative influences of the world in which we live. But our faith does actuate the spiritual responsibility to work, bless, and serve. We do not seek blessings for ourselves. Rather, the blessings we receive enable us to serve other people more efficaciously.
Wow, there's a lot there. Gerardo, I know something about that really struck you hard. Do you want to start?
Yeah, the works don't save us. I think that's Mormonism has been fighting that concept for like 100 years. You know, Bruce or McConkie saying like those Christians that say that works don't save, they're like full of it.
That we're saved by grace alone.
Yeah, that we need, like, basically saying that we need the works. I think that, I mean, I taught that on my mission. We need the works. It's in James.
Faith without works is
dead. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So this seems like a little bit of contradiction with what I taught, what I've heard, what I believed as a Mormon. I believed that it was both grace and works. He's saying works don't save. He said only the grace of Jesus saves. Never heard that before in Mormonism.
You agree with that, Jen?
Yeah, and that's what I've heard in a few Mormon stories, interviews of people of different faiths and their transition. When they speak about Mormonism, they say that that's why they say we're not Christian, is because we believe that we have to do works to be saved. And the other Christian religions believe that grace only saves. And I've never heard that either.
Yeah. Book of Mormon says we're saved by grace only after all we can do.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you think about it, if you masturbate and look at porn at Mormonism, you're screwed. If you don't get baptized as a Mormon, you're screwed. If you don't go to the temple and do your temple ordinances, you're screwed. If you don't get temple married, you're screwed. If you don't pay your tithing, you're screwed. If you
don't read your scriptures,
if you don't read your scriptures and pray, you're screwed. Like, there are a gazillion ways in Mormonism where if you don't do the right works and be obedient, and not just be obedient. What's the first law of heaven in Mormonism?
Obedience.
Jen?
Obedience.
Obedience is the first law of heaven in Mormonism, right? And there's just a gazillion ways where if you don't obey and follow the brethren and do all the things up until the very end, you're screwed. So for like, this is the most works-based Christian church I've ever heard of. Am I wrong?
I think we're up there with the Jehovah's Witnesses, but yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So RFM, do you want to talk about that? The grace and works question really quick?
I'm sorry, you caught me texting.
That's good.
What were we discussing? No, seriously though, this is another example. This is the continuation of the theme that we talked about earlier, where the presentation is that this is a charismatic kind of born again, grace-filled church that works from the inside out, remember?
Yeah.
And we're not like the most legalistic religion in the history of the world.
Yeah. It's all inside out, baby. It's all inside out. Yeah. All right. Any other reactions? Like, I'll just say for me, he's just trying to say it's all about Jesus, and we're all just trying to help people be like Jesus. We're just trying to be like Jesus, and we get all these blessings, but Mormons don't do what they do for blessings.
Oh.
They do what they do to bless other people. Why'd you react that way?
Well,
Gerardo?
the prosperity gospel, right?
What do you mean?
It's a very, very common teaching in Mormonism that the more you're obedient, the more blessings you're going to receive. So therefore, if you want blessings, you need to obey the law that blessing is attached to. I mean, it's even Doctrine and Covenants.
Yeah. Yeah. And even there's a point where like someone asks Bednar or someone else, like, I think it's in the Q&A. It's like, are you ever going to like not make super poor people pay tithing?
Right.
And he's like, no, we don't want to deprive them of the blessings.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Isn't that what he's saying?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he says we don't need your money, but you need the blessings. It's like when Loki says to Thor in the first Avengers movie, "Are you ever not going to fall for that?"
Yeah. So that's weird. All right. So this for Jonathan Streeter, who we love, thoughts on things and stuff. He felt like that this was one of the most shocking parts of the interview for him. It's where the church wants to really emphasize that they're not primarily a humanitarian organization. So let's hear that clip really quick.
I have highlighted many aspects of our humanitarian outreach efforts around the world. Please remember, however, that we are not primarily a humanitarian organization. We are the Church of Jesus Christ, reestablished or restored upon the earth in the latter days in preparation for the second coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. We do all of these things because, as his disciples, we love him and want to follow his example in our lives.
Jen, why are you shaking your head?
Because you should be the primary humanitarian organization. That's what you should be. Like,
I think that's what Jonathan Streeter was saying.
yeah, that's your whole calling. Like, that's the whole purpose of Christ's church.
What was Jesus about in your mind? In your mind, what was Jesus about?
Serving, giving, healing, loving unconditionally.
Yeah.
Helping people find love and God within themselves.
And also like clothing the naked. Like, what did Jesus say? If you love me, wasn't that, what was the part in the New Testament? Like, what does it mean? It's like, in as much as you have done it unto the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me. What does he mean? It's the poor wayfaring man of grief. It's clothe the naked, heal the sick, feed the poor. Is that not, am I getting Jesus wrong, Jen?
No,
it's the Jesus I found outside of Mormonism.
Yeah. And instead it's like, no, build temples, do a gazillion works for the dead, get baptized 1 million times, be a missionary, like pay your tithing, go to BYU, get married, have lots of kids. Did Jesus say any of that?
no.
Like, if you're saying to the world, if you're standing up there at a pulpit, well, a meeting, whatever you have in front of you, saying to the world, we are not primarily a humanitarian organization. That's almost the worst part for me, to be honest.
Was it?
Yeah, the video earlier was kind of bad. But like,
the Bednar hugging the kid.
Standing up there and saying that as like the mouthpiece of God,
as a special witness of Christ.
Right.
Yeah.
He's saying, humanitarian, that's secondary.
Who said like sell everything you have and
follow me.
Yeah, that's like Jesus in the throwing the tables, you know what I mean? Of the temple. I don't know. I don't know. It's just sad to me.
RFM, are you chapped? Is your hide chapped about that point? Randy probably wouldn't love that. Our friend Randy.
No, I think my hide is a little thick where that's concerned. But it did occur to me that really he's being transparent at this point, maybe more transparent than he intends to be, because we just had this discussion about what English class in Japan and pathways. And I think what he just told us is that the secondary purpose of the church, that's the humanitarian aid, the primary purpose of the church is to preach the gospel and get members to join to prepare the world for Jesus' second coming. So if that's correct, and he's just told us it is, then what is the point of the humanitarian efforts?
Oh, because they love Jesus.
No, it's to fulfill the primary purpose that they have, which is to get people to join the church. It's all what we know it is from having been members of the church forever. Anytime you do something good for your neighbor, it's to try and get them to join the church. I mean, isn't that true? It was for me. And that's the way it was presented, and that's the way I lived.
Mhm.
And that's why frequently when you sick the missionaries, you finally break down and you agree to let the missionaries go and see your neighbors, right? And then nothing happens. So I don't know, you're just not really friends anymore. Did that ever happen to anybody other than me?
Absolutely.
That non-members or projects and you're trying to get them to join the church, and it finally comes to an end. They say thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you got to go find somebody else. Maybe you'll have better luck. So you got to drop these guys like a hot potato.
Right.
Yeah.
But I do think that Elder Bednar here has given away the game and said that any humanitarian work that the church does has the ulterior motive of trying to get people to join the church. And I think that's true.
And that's borne out by Gerardo's slide. They only started doing humanitarian aid when they were embarrassed and shamed into doing it. Meaningful, substantive humanitarian aid.
Yes, if that slide is an approximation of reality.
Well, it's based on their own public statements.
Yeah, but he still doubts that 900,
right.
900
Right,
is,
exactly, yeah.
I'm having trouble doubting my doubts on that slide.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and do the last little clip here, and then we will take a couple calls and be done for today, and then we'll come back for part 2 later because there's so much here. He summarizes, if it's not about humanitarianism, this is what it's about.
I conclude by returning to where I began. The basic purpose of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is to help people learn about the nature and attributes of God, to love God, to become disciples of his Son, Jesus Christ, and to love and serve our brothers and sisters. We believe God can change our hearts and make more out of us from the inside out than we can ever make of ourselves. And we also believe that change many times is required from the outside in. We strive to do both. Thank you for this chance to speak with you today.
Did he end it with a chiasmus?
So I've got to run in
I have this microphone, so you can stay at the podium.
I've got to run in like 5 minutes, and we've got a couple people who've been waiting this whole time to talk. Gerardo, 10-second response. Anything you wanted to say about the final close?
No, I think RFM already
Okay.
said it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jen, anything? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Like, which is it? Is it to be disciples of Jesus? What does that mean if it doesn't mean to be humanitarian? Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, what does that mean? Love and serve others. So it's weird.
It also feeds into the reality that all love in the LDS church is conditional.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how so? How so, RFM?
Well, there's always strings attached to any humanitarian efforts. It's an ulterior motive to get people to join the church. Therefore, any love is conditional.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've had a few people who've been waiting a super long time. Bella, you've been waiting a super long time. Maybe you weren't even expecting. Unmute your microphone. And Bella, did you have a quick comment you wanted to share with us? We thanks for.
Hey, wow, where to start? There's so much. Uh, I just really wanted to touch on the money, and it comes to mind the widow's mite, and the church gives so much. They tell others what they give, but they don't tell them what they have. So honestly, if people knew what they have, there was nothing. And then I would like to just tell really quick that the church doesn't really, it's not to take you to Jesus. Most people, or some people, the missionaries go and they teach Christians, but they teach them about Joseph Smith. They teach them about the prophet, the apostles, tithing. Don't drink coffee from now on. You can't drink alcohol, and the whole structure of the church. And you need to agree to all that. You're not learning about Jesus. They already know about Jesus. And the faith without works is dead. I mean, there was so much that talk that I was just like, it's ridiculous. And the people that been inside the Mormon church know what it really is. I was always offended when they said that they were not Christians, and I would defend myself saying, yes, we are Christians. But that, I think it was just because me, in my heart, I always loved Jesus. But honestly, at church, that's not what you learn. You learn about Joseph Smith, and you don't even learn the real stories about Joseph Smith. You just learn the good stuff about Joseph Smith. So honestly, I don't even know what the purpose of the church is.
Beautiful, Bella. Bella, where are you joining us from?
My bunker in Tennessee.
Oh, okay. Well, I want to have you. Where are you originally from?
Portugal.
Okay, I'd love to have you on Mormon Story sometime. So
serious?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So email us, follow up with me and Jen and Gerardo. We want to get you on because I think you'd be a great guest. And we've never interviewed anyone from Portugal.
No, and I do have quite a story, but yeah, I would love to.
Okay, email us at mormonstories@gmail.com.
Will. Thank you all.
Thank you so much for
you all. Jen, love you.
Thanks for
RFM. Love you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bella. All right. The next person that's been waiting a super long time is Adrian Bear. And Adrian, you're walking around. So tell us really, you have to unmute yourself, Adrian, really quick. But I'll unmute you, Adrian. What would you like to say, Adrian?
Hey, I just am really struck by like how emblematic this is of like, I just keep thinking I'm like, for example, I'm queer and my husband is still believing. Like, I cannot imagine a situation where he would be like, look what President Bednar said. This is so awesome. He decided to go in front of this group of people after 20 years and here he said some awesome things. Like, this is not real. This is just like fluff, nothing. Like, I don't see any situation where these men are able to change anything by statements like this, you know?
Yeah. Well, Adrian, thank you. So you're not super impressed with this talk.
It's not mommy. It's just exactly what you would expect. And it's like, power does not relinquish power. He's not going to say anything other than what he's saying. He can't say anything because the reality is if he says anything, it all unravels.
That's powerful, Adrian.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. I'd love to hear more from you. So thanks for waiting. And Adrian, let's have you back on Mormon Stories.
Okay. Have a good one.
Bye. All right. Thanks, Adrian. All right. This is going to be the last call we take. Will, you get the final call-in comment. What would you like to share? And make sure we unmute you. Okay, go ahead, Will.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you great.
Awesome. I just want to comment on the 900 million, the Widow's Might report. They kind of dove into that to take a look and see what was really happening there. And it appears that the church has now added the fast offerings into their humanitarian aid budget. If you go to page 7 of the church's report, right at the very top, it says that the 906 million, number one thing, fast offering assistance. Number 2, bishop orders for goods. So this is the bulk of that money is just the fast offerings that the members are paying that are staying inside the church. It looks like
that was RFM's point, is that it's basically money we're giving ourselves.
Yeah.
But that was before too. So like it's not new. Like in the 40 million, I'm almost 100% sure they were still counting fast offerings.
So it's funny, fuzzy math, basically.
A little math there. So I just came out of a bishopric in our little ward. We would average about $70,000 a year in fast offerings. Wow. Times that by your 31,000. But obviously, outside the United States, you're not going to get the same. But that comes up to $2.5 billion. So honestly, I think that 800,000 to 850,000. 8 million is just a fast offering money. And they've decided to put that money and show it as humanitarian aid. But really, when you're filling out your tithing slip, you remember there's tithing, there's fast offerings, then there's humanitarian aid. They've always been separate. They just merged fast offerings and humanitarian aid to make it look like it's a big number they're delivering, but it's all staying in-house. Next, you'll bump tithing in there.
I did want to say that while the fast offerings might not be as high in developing countries like Mexico, the amount of money that bishops are advised to give is a lot less. So while you're hear cases here in the US that bishops are going to help paying rent or mortgages of members, that would never ever happen in Mexico. In Mexico, at most you'll get, like they'll go and buy you groceries for so you can live for like a month, and that's the most they'll be willing to give. I know that for a fact. My dad's been on the stake presidencies and working on area stuff too, regarding this stuff. So yeah, kind of interesting.
That's fascinating. Do you mind sending us a link to that report, because we would like to share it in the show notes?
Yeah, it's on the church, but I'm happy to send it over to you.
That's brilliant, Will. Any response to Will, RFM? Other than I told you so? You're muted, RFM. Other than I told you so?
No, just that I'm going to catch bloody hell from the guy who actually did the Widow's Mite report, because I know him and I didn't think of it myself. I'm so glad that Will brought that up. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Oh, and actually, I just realized I don't have to run immediately. So if there's any other callers who really quickly, if you want to go to the description of YouTube or Facebook, we put a link at the bottom where you can join the call. We would welcome you. So Bill, you recently you were in a bishopric. Is there anything you want to share about how you're doing, William?
It's it was a wonderful experience, and I just have further light knowledge now. One other point with Bednar's talk, he mentioned hundreds of millions of dollars that are going to the church schools and the good that is doing. And Geraldo brought up the couple hundred that they're getting from, or a couple $100 million they're getting from the government, but really a lot of that money is tithing money coming from other countries. So we see that in the reports where the countries where the church has to report their charitable contributions. You see that in Canada and Australia, where they are publicly, you can see that the church is taking the tithing money out of those countries and actually shipping them to the BYU schools to fund the schools. So it's kind of ironic that, again, talking about great money, and it is, it's wonderful money going to education, but let's just be honest, it's other members' money from other countries that is paying for our colleges here in the US.
Yeah. I think doesn't he say somewhere in that presentation that the church gives over $1 billion a year to the BYUs? Like I thought that's what I understood.
Yeah,
maybe I understood it wrong. William, you're brilliant. Let's have you back on Mormon Stories too. What do you say?
Someday.
All right. Well, thanks for calling in. You really made an important contribution.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. All right. So I guess so. We want to make sure listeners, viewers know this is just half of our review. We still have the Q&A to go, and the Q&A was the one that we wanted to focus on because it's the most interesting. So we will be having a part 2 as soon as we schedule it. We're going to do our best to make it worth RFM's while to come back, but we'll have our panel back. And don't go anywhere, don't go away, because part 2 is going to be amazing. But let's go ahead and do a close. I mean, I think we've done I'm really proud of today's episode. Gerardo couldn't have done it without you. Jen, it's so lovely to have you here.
Thank you.
Make really important contributions as well. And of course, RFM, you're a freaking legend. But let's just have closing statements. So Gerardo, do you have a closing statement you want to make? And then we'll do Jen, and then we'll do RFM. Closing statements.
Yeah. I think there's positives. We see the church moving in a positive direction as far as like how much they're willing to help. I think that's great. I think also this kind of stuff that we're doing right now, this kind of panels is a major contributor for the church church's transparency and willingness to help out more. So, yeah, I think these panels are important.
All right.
Yeah, glad everyone tuned in.
All right. Thanks, Gerardo. We couldn't do it without you.
Thanks.
All right, Jen, closing comments.
No, just thanks to Gerardo for putting this all together, and to the church, be more like Jesus.
Meaning?
Maybe switch that sentence that you said at the end there and be primarily a humanitarian organization
First. Yeah.
first. Yeah.
And be honest.
Yeah.
You taught us what absolute honesty was. You taught us what the full truth, complete honesty was. Maybe show that a little. Is that fair?
Yeah, in all areas, historically, and every area.
Honest in all your dealings with
your fellow men
and women and non-binary people.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jen. All right, RFM. Closing statements. Oh, and unmute yourself, my good brother.
If you only knew the sounds that are going on over here, you'd be glad I did mute myself. But seriously, folks, you remember that scene in Thor? I think it's from The Dark World, where he's so pained at Loki because they're brothers, and Loki's always, screwing him over and stabbing him in the back, regardless of what Loki says. And there's this wonderful scene where Thor looks at him and it's just pain. He says, "I wish I could trust you." That's how I feel about Elder Bednar. And I think the second person who called in was getting to that point too, and talking about questioning his sincerity in what he says, because all he's going to say is what he's going to say. He's not going to say the truth. But I will say this to you, Elder Bednar. I really do wish I could trust you.
Beautiful. All right. Well, RFM, we love you. Please go right now to Radio Free Mormon website, radiofreemormon.com, or Mormonism Live. And radiofreemormon.org.
Yes, for all those hundreds and thousands of people who are stampeding over there right now, I want to make sure they get to the right website.
well, let's put it in the comments. Let's put it in the comments. It's radiofreemormon.org. It's Mormonism Live. What?
No, I don't even pay attention to that.
But also check out Mormonism Live.
Let me check it out while you're talking.
Every Wednesday.
Bill's going to kill me.
Every Wednesday at 6:20 p.m. on YouTube. You can.
Yeah, it's on YouTube. MormonismLive.org as well.
Okay, but you can also check in live to Mormonism Live with Bill Reel and Radio Free Mormon, and get an amazing weekly show about all things Mormon. And you're a legend, RFM. So we're really honored that you would grace us with your presence, and that you would mute yourself when it was appropriate.
Yes. Earlier on, I didn't have myself muted, but I'm blaming that one on Gerardo.
All right, Gerardo. Thanks. Thanks, RFM. It's great to have you. We love you.
Okay.
All right. And thanks everyone for joining us today on Mormon Stories. Do not forget to tune into part 2, where we actually do the interesting part of this interview, which is the Q&A between the reporter and David Bednar. David A. Bednar. It's going to be great. So it's going to come next. But thanks for your support. If you value Gerardo, if you value Jen, if you value all the work that we do behind the scenes, Nemo, etc., the lights, the cameras, the broadband, running of the nonprofit, if you value this programming, please become a monthly supporter. You can super chat right now. You can click on the $ on your YouTube chat or the stars feature on Facebook, and you can donate to us that way. But we really appreciate if you become a monthly donor. Go to MormonStories.org, click on the donate button. Your donations keep us alive. And you can feel good that you're contributing, instead of contributing to an organization that's just enriching itself and not trying to necessarily spend its wealth doing good. We give you our commitment that every dollar you donate to the Open Stories Foundation or Mormon Stories, we're gonna funnel right back into our missions, which are to provide informed consent to Mormons and non-Mormons across the world, so people know the truth about the church. Whether they want to join it or not is up to them. and to support people in faith crisis, both Mormon and outside of Mormonism. We have half of our YouTube viewership has never been Mormon. So, you can help people in faith crisis, and you can help people who are trying to heal and grow after being in a high demand religion, Mormonism or otherwise. That's where your donations go. We feel like it's a worthy cause. Please support us, and we'll keep doing this for as long as you support us. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in live. We love you. Be good to each other. Be kind to each other. And we'll see you all again very soon on another episode of Mormon Stories podcast. Take care, everybody.